Chapter 647, Lost in Time. With the epic failure that is the Siege of Solitude, the situation on the Dragon Cult's end was definitely chaotic. The Wise Dragon's Horde was defeated not too long ago, and the Secret Dragon Horde is now on the run. They were extremely sure that they could have destroyed Solitude and gave his Stormcloak a great advantage to reignite the Civil War, but they lost 4 dragons in one day. Lotso, the leader of the Secret Dragon Horde and one of those who were resurrected by Alduin, was contemplating on that failure and how to recover from it. Recently, Alduin has been gathering enough energy to resurrect new dragons and grow stronger, but the rate of how many dragons were falling to the Dragonborn was almost the same. The attack on Solitude was made with the intention of devastating Solitude the same way Lotso knew in the past. Back in the day during the Dragon War in the First Era, the dragons would send their agents to assassinate the chieftain of a certain tribe, which is by default its main pillar of strength. 4,000 years later, the situation seemed the same to some of the old dragons, and so they went after Jarl Elisif. But many variables happened. First, Jarl Elisif died too soon when the plan to attack Solitude was still premature. There was a chance that the curse would work too soon, but this was even sooner than expected. The cult had to take the initiative and attack, while the city was dazed thanks to the situation of the Bloody Wedding. Second, there was a different power controlling Solitude, and that was the Empire. The Dragon Cult has gained enough information to understand the whole situation with the Empire and its foundation, which was founded long after the death of many dragons and the banishment of Alduin. Still, the complicated political climate rendered the death of Jarl Elisif useless. Third, the existence of a Nord warlord John Dare, who sponsors the Dragonborn. Knowing that the Dragonborn is located in Winterhold and moves around Skyrim by a network of portals according to the most recent dragon sightings, the Dragon Cult made an alliance with a wizard that was able to disturb any teleportation attempt between Winterhold and Solitude. While this plan worked, the Dragonborn still appeared somehow, and hand in hand with John Dare, they dropped 4 dragons in one battle. Epic as this failure may be, the aftermath was nothing but a pain in the ass for all who are involved. My lord, your servant, Nalat, kneels before you. Some of the few who survived were Lotso, who didn't participate in the fight, Nalat, who could easily escape, and a small score of cultists around 200. This marks the loss of 3,000 cult members and 1,000 allies from the Reachmen, known as the Forsworn. Most of the brothers who died in our ranks were killed in battle. This guarantees their departure to Sovngarde, my lord. As for the enemies, we killed almost twice what we lost, so that makes a total of 9,000 souls sent to Lord Alduin. Nalat reported to the Silent Dragon, standing on top of a lofty ancient word wall. Yet despite my best efforts, John Dare didn't die. It wasn't just Lotso and Nalat in this place, though. There were 2 others who were dressed in heavy cloaks, and the one that spoke just now was Maven Blackbriar. It is a surprise how he survived. I can't help but feel dejected, too. Messner added. Nalat, who was just kneeling to Lotso, raised his head and stared coldly at the 2. What exactly are you trying to say with those words of yours? He asked. You boasted to me about the dragon's ability to do reconnaissance. We expected information that could help us eliminate John Dare, and what we got was a disappointment on all fronts. Maven complained, I risked a lot by hiding your sabotaging force in the city. You promised me that John Dare wouldn't be able to escape. Show respect, human. The dragon priest lashed back. I want that man dead just as much as you do. He killed everyone I know 3 years ago, and he is the force behind the Dragonborn. And wasn't killing him your wizard's duty? Isn't that incompetence on your part? Don't you shift the blame on us. Maven replied, You said that John Dare wouldn't receive any assistance, that he was away from all his allies, and that the attack we used would be sufficient to kill him. And I'm sick of you complaining. All right, Sarah, this is enough. Messner interfered to stop Maven and Nalat from squabbling more than this before he turned to the dragon. As the actual leader of the Dragon Horde, we would like to hear your opinion, Honorable Lot Sovngarde. The dragon was surely silent, with 3 mortals on the throat of each other. He looked between the 3 and lamented. For the first time, Lotso spoke in a draconic, deep voice. A human, an elf, an undead. 3 of you failed to kill 1 Jor, 1 mortal. The warlord lives not because we did not isolate him or attack him with enough power. The warlord lives because he is Silkrennic. Lotso words didn't mean anything to Maven or Messenger, but Naloth thought deeply. Soul broken, Naloth asked but didn't understand. Soul divided, yet a reply came, not from any of the 4, but from a portal that silently opened in the vicinity of this place. John Dare walked out with Envy, who seemed to be the one who cast the portal. Everyone around was stunned by his appearance, save for the dragon. Messenger was the most shocked since he didn't expect John to be this sneaky. Drimyal Locke, greetings. You must be Lotso Vengean. John spoke. Dovahkiin, the dragon replied. What? And the 3 were for another round of shock. You were followed by a strange scent, Naloth. Lotso Vengean explained. But, Lord, I have fought Dovahkiin. The human isn't. Naloth couldn't believe what he heard, but things started to make more and less sense at the same time. As long as the true face of the Dragonborn is veiled in mystery and rumors, anyone can be a Dragonborn. Of course, I must be there to make sure dragons die properly and absorb their souls. John said with a grin. Now, with his identity revealed to them 4, it means that he isn't planning to let them live with that secret. What does it mean? At that time, Messenger asked, a soul divided, you said. Soul energy tends to replenish itself, but always stays under control and never really vanishes unless returned to Etherius via death. Binding a part of your living soul to an object that fits, it will always anchor your original soul to its actual body. With enough anchors, your soul shall always be in your astral form to the end of its natural lifespan without being killed. Since the anchors always bind and keep the soul working, Messenger said, meaning that my attack, it worked against you and really killed you. Correct. John nodded. You came the closest to killing my physical body, but as my astral body never really dies and my physical body always heals. It is some sort of pseudo-immortality. John was even kind enough to explain it all to them. The 4 of them aren't really surviving this. Incredible. Messenger applauded John's genius, but that works only in theory. I have some well-kept secrets, of course. John smiled and made a hushed gesture. Many in the old days knew your ways. Lotso Vengean spoke. On Old Davenor, Akavir, and Old Atmara, Yvonne Vith, the Golden Serpents, sealed their heroes in their blades, so they rise again with new wielders. Odihoxii, Snow Demons, did the same, but soon they forgot how when they forgot their mere ancestors. I surely love to hear more about Akavir and Atmara from a person who witnessed them. However, I copied my methods based on the rituals of the 3 God Kings of Morrowind. Your kind was eradicated from Skyrim before those 3 even appeared. John said. The word 3 God Kings of Morrowind seemed to have irritated Messenger a bit, which John managed to catch. A Dunmare with dwarven prosthetics. John wondered, you are a citizen of Clockwork City by any chance? That's none of your business. Messenger became more irritated once John brought up that name. Fine, you'll all die anyway. Envy, John said and rushed towards the dragon priest. Naloth first, while Envy charged towards Maven and Messenger. Get away. Messenger fended off Envy with a ward spell, but she wasn't aiming for him from the start. As Envy got to Maven, she held her from the neck and used her ability Dread of Solitude on Maven. No. Messenger was a second too late, as Envy started to absorb something from Maven, as if she was sucking out her soul. Messenger blasted Envy away, but she levitated and hovered over them ready to strike. As Messenger held up the collapsed Maven, he found that she looks as if she has aged 30 years, with her face becoming gray and wrinkled and her hair ashen white. He fended off Envy again and looked at the others to see that John had caught Dragon Priest Naloth and impaled him on a greatsword. Meanwhile, the dragon Lotso Vengean flew off and retreated from the fight. Ow! Nalot couldn't believe that he was dying to John Dare this easily. I figured out you were forsworn, John said. That's why I kept talking until my agents eradicate all the remaining force that you might transfer yourself to. It seemed I wasn't the only one playing with soul magic around. John made sure to soul trap the body of Nalot and recover the dragon priest mask intact. That is a shame. I quite wanted to experiment on that. The augur spoke through the system. This one is a bust, John replied. To the usually silent augur, the dragon priest Nalot was a very special case. It could be that Nalot is the nearest existence there is to the augur, as it was a soul attached to many artifacts and preserved a very excellent grade of intelligence after death. This sort of ego is quite common, though. They escaped. Envy approached John as she was fixing her arm that seemed to have been damaged in her fight against Messner. At least Maven is down. I will personally visit Riften to get rid of them, but I need to get that dragon first. John cracked the Nalot mask and eradicated the soul within before taking to the sky and flying towards where he senses Lotso Vengeance to be. The dragon was not in the sky, and John had to clear all the weather in order to look clearly. Still, the dragon didn't seem to have used magic to teleport. John looked around and looked really well, but he couldn't find a trace, so he had to do this the brute way of leaving no stone unturned. The dragon is naturally a creature with a strong aptitude to magic, thus sensing their magic is always easy. Sadly, sensing normal and dormant magicka in a large radius is never easy to achieve since. Found him. I'm awesome. John managed to feel the magicka of the dragon, as it seems to have fluctuated a little bit more than it should. The dragon was attempting to do something, but now that John is on him, there's no way he escapes cleanly. Nope, that won't do well at all. But John couldn't find any dragon where he landed. Rather, he found the ever-peaceful town of Dragonbridge. But this raised too many questions in John's head all at the same time. For starters, why is nobody panicking, or at least some woman running around and screaming dragon in a Nord accent? It felt wrong on many levels. John had to disguise himself and walk into the town. The people were still on edge from every coming and going stranger since the attack of the dragon cult is still fresh news around here. Seeing a man walking in, an Imperial patrol felt like exercising their power to question him. But as they approached him, he pointed to the insignia on the armor he was wearing, and it showed the Imperial dragon. His appearance didn't give off the character of a legionary, but seeing him wearing a Nordhorn helm, the legionaries immediately remembered the rumors of the Dragonborn. "Sir, by any chance are you?" the legionary asked, but John glared at him to shut up since he was focusing. The glare carried an intimidating sensation of magicka to it, and the legionaries felt fear right away. As John passed them, however, they could speak and breathe again. "Phew, by Azura, my heart was about to blow up again," said the first Imperial legionary. "Yeah, just like that officer from a while ago," said the second Imperial legionary. John heard what they said and frowned immediately. An officer? A legion officer? Can it be? Currently, John could notice 7 individuals who fit the description. 1 in the tavern, 3 in front of the security office, 2 doing patrols, and 1 standing over the dragon bridge and watching the river flow. The last one was especially large and maybe taller than John. A true freak of nature. As the man stood watching the river, he could feel a wind gust nearby as another man rushed at a speed unimaginable for a human and stood there facing him with a sword in hand. "You're a hard man to shake off, Jor," the Imperial legionary said. "It's Dovahkiin for you, Dova," John replied. "Mr. Dovahkiin would make me more pleased, though. A few months ago, when I heard Alduin's voice in my bones and life flowed back in me, it felt almost impossible when I found out that he was intending to fulfill his destiny and eat the world. He seemed to me like he was done playing games and ruling over mortals. It is ancient history to you, but to him, this whole war started less than a year ago. We all slumbered due to our brief death, then 4,000 years, just like that. You know, it feels like yesterday when I witnessed this bridge being built in my honor. I look down on you, Jor, but you're just as immortal as we are, just in a different way. Lotsovenjan touched the stones of the bridge with his bare, human hands and smirked. His nails and teeth weren't human despite his fantastic human form. "You're a piece of work yourself. I never knew you would take the appearance of a mortal just to try and escape me," John said. "Back in the day, destroying you was rather easy. Kill their leaders, the rest fall in line. For 1,000 years can make your perspective of dealing with things very inefficient. For example, I thought killing the queen would bring the city to chaos as it just started a war by killing the king. But it didn't work that way. You killed the queen to make things get in order. You united the mortals, put us in the position of guilt, and bested our plan. Once that queen died, I knew I was doing it all wrong. This is not the era of dragons anymore, and we are playing a game we don't know its rules. Alduin led us into yet another folly." You're used to this." Lotsovenjan smirked. "You have no idea. Davenor Akavir was the best time of our lives until he decided to eat the Great Four. Yvonvith, the Golden Serpents, didn't like what we did to their mother, so we were hunted, our kin slaughtered and eaten, and on their corpses, the Sifim was built and the eternal war erupted. Never to this day did it ever end." Sifim? Eternal war? John lost Lotsovenjan there for a moment. "That's on Davenor? The war where if it ends, they would rally towards Tamriel next?" "Indeed. The tragedy of the Four Kingdoms. But in Tamriel, you never expect that after 400 years the world will remain puzzling. I always wondered what's on the other side of this lousy dream." John looked closely at Lotsovenjan and frowned, but in a split of a second, Lotsovenjan turned to him with his mouth wide and his eyes turning draconic. The Thursday was just on the tip of his tongue, but the dragon's head went flying with one strike of the blade. John immediately held the body and threw it off the bridge before the transformation is canceled. The headless body of a dragon shocked the people of Dragonbridge Village, and they all could see the man standing on the edge of the bridge, holding a dragon's head from its horn that dangled off the cliff. The dragon's body dissolved into strands of divine energy and flew to encase the Dragonborn with their power as the dragon's body turned into bones. "The age has turned long ago, old-timer," John said. "What will remain is always legacy." John said these words, then left the dragon's skull on Dragon Bridge, the entrance of Hafengar, as a sign of killing the last aggressor on this hold. Chapter 648, Recipe for Disaster. I was out of town for the past couple of days, so take this 2-in-1 double chapters. All the best. This chapter also has some past reveals. Buckle up. Part 1. And for my first order as the Jarl of Solitude, I hereby appoint John Hild Firemane, known to the public as John Dare, a Thane of Hafengar with all the rights to operate as a first-class law-enforcing official in this realm. The second who will gain this title is the Dragonborn, whose name shall be withheld from the public due to security reasons. May the light of the divine bless you all, and bless Hafengar. Jarl Breiling of Solitude made the speech on the gates of the Blue Palace after she put her sword to rest and carried a hammer to fix the palace's broken gate. She was still with the hammer in her hand when a message came from the Elder Council that she was recommended for the seat of Jarl and was approved by the Emperor immediately. Breiling kneeled before the imperial decree, issued John's title of a Thane, then turned back to hammer the dent on the gate as if nothing happened. John heard the news when he was on the dockyard overseeing the business reopening of the East Empire Trading Company office. This time, the company officers were waiting for his orders to start running their business. "I guess my work here is done." Behind him, Thane Brina Marilis stood with still the same look in her eyes. "I guess so," John said. She was here taking a boat back to Dawnstar when she ran into John. Strange enough, this woman would rather head but than avoid him. "It is a shame. You can stay here and be of good use to Breiling." John couldn't help but smear his salt. "She is an upright woman, much more than I can ever be. Sadly, she is delusional like the rest of them." Brina said. "You hate me this much?" John asked. "Because you're by no means upright. You are not a bad person, John Dare. I know that well, or you would have never succeeded. But you don't care about the small people beneath. Is that so? John asked. Last I checked, Winterhold doesn't even have slums, and Dawnstar situation is just because someone is being as stubborn as an old goat. You see it wrong. Brina said, what you see is that so long they work under you, it is all fine. Tell me, John Dare, can I just be a small person, go into Winterhold, buy a shop, and run a smithy? Before you answer, no one can. Brina said, because no one can rival the Dare Industries. A workshop that houses 70 smithing experts and makes them work with machines and tools not a random smith can even acquire. Not even the great Irland Greymane with a legendary forge can hold a candle to the Dare Industries anymore. Brina continued, not even Arcadia the healer alchemist of Whiterun is as good as the Dare Pharmacy. No mercenary in Skyrim is better equipped than a Dare Corp mercenary. Not a single merchant is as fast as a Dare ship or a Dare caravan. Then they start losing business and fall into debt before they run around to who? To you, John Dare. You give them money, own half their business, and call investment, then all of a sudden, they just fall in love with you again. You see why, John Dare? My methods of helping people are flawed. John asked. No, they're almost flawless. So flawless you start missing the flaws that we were used to. When was the last time I saw two blacksmiths competing with each other over whose craft is better, or two alchemists pranking each other with their brews? Where did that spirit go? Now, they all work to meet your supply and demand ratios with soulless eyes and pockets full of your gold. And something tells me you know what I'm talking about too well. Then she left on a longboat that was conveniently setting off just as she got in. I didn't know it too damn well. John sighed and sat on a crate watching the sea. Never mind her, son. But Johnrad was there already drinking and offering his son a bottle. All you've done was push those people forward to have better lives. Yeah. John smiled. What are you up to? Nothing, Johnrad replied. Think of it as drinking with an old friend I don't really want to see. Johnrad raised his bottle towards the Emperor's ship sitting at the mouth of the river. Any chance his first name is Titus? John asked. Yeah. Used to work for him. You know how it ended. Johnrad said. He called me Johnrad when he saw me, and I couldn't help but feel my stomach, John said. Ugh, even Johnrad made that face. The two turned around and spat in the river. God, I must have looked horrible when I was young. God, I must have had my face smeared with shit in the fight. Jornad. A drunken Nordman walked to him. Dame, I see 4 of you now. That's a drinking buddy of mine I just met. Johnrad introduced. His name is, I don't remember. Handsfuckbeard or something similar. I didn't know anymore. That's an Argonian name, John said. The only thing you take after me, son, is your tolerant attitude with other races. Old John praised young John. John pushed the drunken man away with a stick into a boat, and the man went to sleep. Whatever, John said. So old comrades are bringing you down here just to drink with the drunken sailors. It is a custom to drink for 3 days after surviving a battle, boy. Johnrad said. Thank goodness it is ending tonight then, and I don't get drunk anymore. John said, and threw the bottle away. That woman frustrated you? Johnrad asked. Well, you know how it goes. I hate those memories. What memories? Past life. You used to brag about them. I still do. I just don't like bad ones. Bad ones? Being a powerless man. Not being able to make a difference. Everything is planned for me to do. Hating that I'm worth nothing and my fate is in the hands of someone stronger, richer, and sleeps with enough women to make a pimp cry from jealousy. Now you're bragging. Johnrad chuckled. But after that illusion realm you created for your past life, I see that it is too much for a person to bear sometimes. Too much in life, you just forget it was all once this simple. Yeah, it seems I made too much progress, and it upsets some people. But your past was a low-ranking law person. You didn't have the blood of your father like you have now, or your family. I'm not talking about being a lawyer, John said. I was talking about the exact thing you said after it. Johnrad found his son's words puzzling for the first time. I became a lawyer out of my rebellion against a father. John said, he was my father all right, but he was no family. It was almost the first time John talked in detail about his past self. A father, but not family. Yeah, me and him with a big-ass house and endless money. I just had to follow everything I was told. Be the perfect fiddle. John said, "It is like I'm getting to know about you for the first time." John Rad said, "So you experienced life as a privileged child. Why did you turn out to be a poor wuss?" That takes us to the woman who was supposed to be my mother. How so? Let's just say that having two mothers in this life is probably a compensation from the heavens, since I never knew who she was. You made the drink taste like shit now. John Rad said, "It always does. I know that I am your father, boy, no doubt. But to the other you in there, that man may have been your father, but he was never your daddy." John Rad said in a state of drunken pride, "You know what? I'm just too tired to lay the itchy curse on you." John said and walked away. "Wait, itchy curse? The other day. That was you?" John didn't listen and walked away fast, but Nefertiti appeared before him. "Something happened, human," she said. "All right." John crouched down. "Take me there." The two disappeared via teleporting, and after they did, a bottle was smashed at where John stood. "Damn you, stupid lawyer's son. You lawyers always make people feel itchy, bring shame upon your ancestors. Oblivion takes you all." Part 2. Master, you said that the future should unfold this way, but it didn't. Beth offered John a timeline of her monitoring operation. "This is strange. That's why I asked Nefertiti to tell you." "Good job, girls." "Can we go play now?" Nefertiti asked as she jumped on the paper at John's hand. "Beth, you can have a break until tomorrow. And you kitty cat will also take a break before we can head out." John passed Nefertiti to Beth and started to compare his information with the report. The Dark Brotherhood is John's next playground, but it seemed that the unexpected happened. In the game, after taking the contract on the Emperor's head from Amon Modier, the player has to kill 3 figures in order to approach the Emperor. First, Vittoria Vici, the Emperor's cousin. Once she gets butchered in her wedding, the Emperor will be obliged to attend her funeral. Second, Gaius Maro, son of Commander Maro of the Imperial Secret Service and head of the Emperor's security. By killing him and planting false evidence on his body, the Emperor will understand that the attempt was failed, alienate Commander Maro, whose son is a traitor, and have a fake sense of peace as his assassination attempt was already foiled. Third, the Gourmet, an enigmatic cook whose skills are second to none on Tamriel. This man was supposed to cook for the Emperor by his request. Once the cook is killed, the assassin will pose as the cook and poison the Emperor. The problem doesn't lie in any of the 3, but between the second and the third. Once the player is done with the second, a situation will occur in the Sanctuary of the Dark Brotherhood, where the Keeper of the Night Mother, the jester called Cicero, will attempt to attack the leader of the Sanctuary, Astrid, and injures the assassin Viezra instead. After that happens, the player will have to chase after Cicero all the way to Dawnstar and deal with him. The player then takes the 3rd kill on their hit list. But what went wrong was the fact that Cicero didn't do anything, meaning that unlike the game, this Cicero behaved out of line, and Serana, the one posing as the listener, proceeded to the 3rd kill and isn't too far from the Gourmet's location. The Gourmet must live. John immediately donned greed as a cloak, called all his artifacts from around the Golden Dragon Isle, and opened a portal to the Nightgate village. Serana's signal wasn't too far to the west, and John had to deal with things before she would do anything. He walked immediately to the Nightgate Inn and looked around the place. "Huh, you're here, Captain." The voice of an old man reacted to John's appearance in the inn. "Old Fultheim, I'm the son, not the father. I told you last time to go visit the Dare Pharma and get your sight checked." "Bah, a brat with an attitude," said Fultheim, who is a regular at the Nightgate Inn and a friend to John's parents, as well as the one who delivered him to Rift Inn when he was about 1 year old along with Hilda. Chapter 3. "Old man, a quick question." John walked in the empty and started pouring some oatmeal in a plate before putting it in front of Fultheim. "You didn't happen to see an orc lodging in this inn? Seems like a rich guy." "Yeah, he takes the room in the cellar for some weird reason. He is out picking herbs, so wait for him." Fultheim said, "I would love to, but I have to get to him before the others do. We'll tell father you said hey." John pushed himself up and left. Suit yourself. John hurried out and looked around the roadside in order to find the gourmet, who is an orc. The place seemed empty, so he utilized a spell to look for the man in question, and there he was. But he wasn't alone. There, John could see a man talking to the gourmet, and the two were very engrossed in their conversation. But for how much longer? The orc asked. I have long since run out of ingredients to experiment on. Master Balagog, we promise you it will be within a week at the very most. This will help you establish your goals as well as ours. The other man replied, who seemed to be a Breton after a further inspection. You people approached me with this proposition first. I really appreciate your patronage, but I have a lot to get done, and this barren wasteland has nothing left to offer. If you don't come to me in 1 week, I will leave for Solitude right away. The orc raised his tone. I understand. Please, meet us in Solitude after 6 days to give us time to prepare. If you go to Winterhold, you could take a fast ship to Solitude from there. The Breton said. I see. Be on your way then. The orc agreed at the end. This conversation was between the gourmet and an agent of an imperial faction. John guessed the agent should either be a member of the Penitus Oculatus or one of Amon Modier's men. In any case, John waited for the orc to start heading back to the Nightgate Inn. On the road to the inn, John sat on a stone and had a bowl of green soup on his left hand. In his right, he carried a piece of bread that he would dip in the soup and eat from in supreme ecstasy. That is an interesting smell, my friend. And the terrifying voice of an orc woke John from his dream. Yes, it is. John opened his eyes peacefully and agreed with the orc. Are you sharing? The orc asked. Always. John nodded. John offered a loaf of bread to the orc who sat beside him and dipped it in the soup bowl, just as John did. I like the spices, and the main ingredient leaves a strong breath too, a bit southern. Jute mellows. I see, finely diced, pretty rare outside Cyrodiil and Valenwood. The orc nodded. It had garlic and was made in chicken broth. Indeed. I prefer more broth than the usual recipe, though. John said, salt, pepper, and vegetable oil to finish this spell. Simple yet marvelous. I say the secret is in the broth. The orc said, damn right. John laughed. Normally people use beef and chicken broth, but nothing can rival a rabbit broth. Do you happen to be the gourmet by any chance? Ha ha. The orc laughed loudly. No, that's you, silly. Ha ha. John laughed harder and clapped hands with the orc. Then the two stared at each other with their smiles disappearing. Damn, the orc said and offered a handshake. I am not supposed to reveal this, but you can call me Balagog Gronolib. Nice to meet. John shook hands with Balagog. And you are? You can call me Daedric Prince of all cuisines. John said. Ah, people call me John Dare. The John Dare? Balagog asked. Am I that famous? John asked before laughing it off. Yes, I am. Well, it is an honor to finally meet you, sir. I truly didn't imagine a dish this fine to originate from the freezing north. You mean this Malokia? No, it doesn't originate from here. Nords have no taste buds last time I checked. Wow, so true. Neither do orcs, sadly. You and I are kindred souls in this harsh world, Balagog. So where does this Malokia originate from? Heaven. And does heaven have a name or an address? Heard of Egypt before? No, that's that then. Well, Lord John Dare, it was a pleasure, Balagog the gourmet said, and stood up. If you excuse me, are you going to cook for the Emperor? John asked. The orc froze for a second before turning toward John. I don't know what you're talking about, sir. Balagog replied. If you stay here, the Emperor's enemies will try and get to you. John said, I made sure that my identity is a secret, my lord. Well, that until you found me. But I'm sure I am of no use to someone like you. Balagog insisted. I know. You are of no use to the point where even only your contact knows your actual identity. And so, any man can claim that they are the gourmet if they have your identity papers, which of course you keep as a secret. What are you saying, sir? I am saying that they will kill you, impersonate your identity, and poison His Imperial Majesty Titus Mede too. John said. That's... Balagog felt heavy in his heart and looked wary at John, then at the bowl he was holding. What? John felt offended. Why would I poison you? I want to save the Emperor, you dolt. John swallowed the soup in one go and threw the bowl. You need to run, and I am here to help you get away. An asset such as yourself is too valuable to die here. John said, I can't. Balagog said, Why not? John stood up. Because for my dream to come true, I need the Emperor. Balagog said, What dream? John asked. As you already know, I am the gourmet, and I am an Orsimer. Balagog said, People would assume the gourmet is a Bosmare or even a Breton, but an orc, that would be impossible. So, in order to prove myself and my cooking, I need the Emperor to recognize who I am, and from there, no one will look down on me because of my race. No one expects an orc to be a cook, but an orc that cooked for the Emperor, that's a different story. So your secret identity isn't because you're a mystery junkie, but just a confidence issue. Confidence? You can kill me, but you better not insult me. I've learned to cook in the most prestigious kitchens in Elden Root. My confidence can reach the throat of the world. It is people that need to stop with their stereotypes and know that anyone can cook. An Argonian, a Nord, an orc, a rat, or even a Dunmare. Well, let's not go that far with Dunmare. Yeah, you're right, but I need to build a reputation first, then gain support to open the best restaurant in the Imperial City. Balagog Gronalib seemed to have a lofty goal that even John can't ignore. So, no matter what killer is coming, I can't back down here. I see. So, you want a hype master then? John asked. A what? A professional hustler, an advertising manager, a popularity campaign, John explained. What's that? Balagog asked. That, my friend, is a very serious business that I personally do. If you allow me to accompany you to Winterhold, you will have the greatest showman in Tamriel hustling for your restaurant. John joined interlocked arms with Balagog Gronalib and led him towards Winterhold. Historians recorded that in a few years of this meeting, the chain restaurants of BFC, Balagog's Flavors Cuisine, became one of the most successful Tamriel-wide businesses associated with the Dare investment plan. Its symbol, the gentlemanly smiling orc, has become so widespread that most orcs were always stereotyped as natural chefs. Serana was well aware that the man who was standing in front of the Night Gaiden's entrance was John, the person who has been moving her strings for a while now. She expected to see him soon, especially after the situation in Solitude, but the latest rumor about him saving the city from a dragon cult attack was everywhere. Also, he seemed like he was waiting for her, even though she made sure to never reveal herself yet. You seem angry at me. John spoke from a distance, but with her heightened senses, Serana could hear him as if they were standing next to each other. Serana walked at a normal pace to John, and as she reached him, she looked at him and seemed greatly displeased. I've been doing Astrid's biddings for long enough, she said. True. John nodded. I came for you to stop my father. I know what you're doing is important, and there are dragons and the Emperor's life is on the line, but I didn't sign up to do any of this. Serana stated. And he asked. I want out, she said. Seeing the look on John's face change and him walking towards her, Serana didn't really fear him, but couldn't predict what he would do. Will you be satisfied if I come with you and finish this once and for all? John asked. I don't want to interrupt whatever important business you have going on. I know you're a Dragonborn, and you managed to obtain 2 Elder Scrolls. I also know that you can protect yourself from my father, but he will keep coming. I know. John nodded. Then, are you letting me go? Have I ever held you against your will, Serana? John asked. You could have walked away long ago, and the time you spent among the assassins surely have served you well. You are no longer helpless or needing help. You are beautiful, lethal, resourceful, and powerful. You could have walked away long ago. But you wouldn't let me. John felt that Serana was having another inner struggle and denying her own ability to proceed on her own if she wanted to. Let me ask you about that woman of yours, the one that used to be an assassin. Serana spoke. Psycho, did she do anything to you? John asked. She planted my face to the ground when we ran into each other in Rift Inn once. Serana then asked, That was you sending her after me, wasn't it? It wasn't, John denied. To be honest, I lost a great deal of trust in your words since that night. Serana said, I'm actually not surprised you ran into each other. Jelinar oversees my interests in the Thieves' Guild in Riften, and she picked up the hobby of hunting vampires for the Dawnguard. But this is my first time hearing that you two ran into each other before Solitude. John said, On the other hand, you seem to have been doing problems, cute little fangs. Psycho wouldn't have targeted you unless you showed your nature as a vampire and left a witness. Serana couldn't say anything since John wasn't wrong. How about this to restore trust between us? John smiled. I'll drop off whatever I'm doing and go deal with the Dark Brotherhood situation together. John's made Serana extremely worried with his proposition, but if he is finally planning on taking his role as the listener of the Dark Brotherhood, she has nothing to complain about. And so, the plan of assassinating the Emperor started to go in a clear motion. Chapter 649, Dear Cicero. Is it Eid? Is it holiday? No, but it is another 2-in-1 chapter. My hands hurt. I should divide those chapters into 2 from now on. Part 1. While the situation was unfolding in Solitude, Whiterun was having its troubles going on, and the one who was in the spotlight was John's sworn brother, Wulfur. Wulfur has joined the Companions and moved to Breezeholm Manor in Whiterun to keep an eye on things. In the notes that John gave him, there were many secrets and future events that made Wulfur not know how to think about it all. John said that Wulfur can either save Codlac Whitemane from an assassination attempt launched by the Silverhand werewolf hunters or leave Codlac to die, which will open the door for him to be the harbinger of the Companions. The problem was that this attack will happen when Wulfur leaves to slay the Glenmeril witches per Codlac's request, and John doesn't know how to stop it from happening unless Wulfur convinces some of the Companions to protect Codlac personally. For that, Wulfur could only turn to Ela the Huntress, but her reaction wasn't anything special since she didn't imagine that some bandits like the Silverhand would find it easy to break into Whiterun and make trouble with the entire body of the Companions. It took Wulfur 4 days to travel to where the Glenmeril witches were, kill them all, and return to Whiterun. The whole process was done at the fastest speed he could achieve, but just as John foretold, the Companions were attacked and Codlac Whitemane was killed. Wulfur wasn't the kind to get attached to many people, but Codlac was a good old man whose honor was known across Skyrim. Seeing the old man stabbed and torn with the red of his blood, mixing with the white of his hair, made Wulfur silent and sad. Codlac, I am sorry. Ela was the one to first get on her knees and cry over Codlac's body. Farkas and Vilkas were in grief, and Skjor swore vengeance and headed off. Let's move the old man somewhere else. Wulfur asked Ela, who nodded and started going behind Codlac's head to hold him from his shoulders. You don't need to. Farkas and I will. Vilkas wanted to carry Codlac instead of Ela since she was overcome with emotions, but she shook him off her shoulder with a violent jolt and waited for Farkas to carry Codlac in front of her. Vilkas made sure that Ela and Farkas put Codlac's body on the biggest table and rested his axe in his hand. Meanwhile, Wulfur approached Vilkas. I've brought the heads of the witches Codlac wanted. Wulfur said, That should wait. This ritual must be done later. Vilkas said, The more we wait, the longer his soul stays in the hunting grounds of Herson. That's not what he wanted. Wulfur said, Then you know how this ritual is done? Vilkas asked. I do. Wulfur nodded. I see. Vilkas nodded. We can't bury him before getting vengeance. Ela said, Wulfur, you will come with me. Wulfur looked closely at Ela as she walked away, fuming with vengeance. He turned to Vilkas and asked, Where is Skjor? I don't know. He just left and nobody could stop him. Vilkas replied, This is bad. Wulfur didn't feel good about this situation. Originally, Skjor was supposed to die in the fight with the Silverhand earlier than Codlac, but because Wulfur refused to turn into a werewolf like the rest of the members of the Companions' inner circle, this situation wasn't triggered. Wulfur headed out immediately and looked for Ela. When he found her, she was already readying her sword. Where is Skjor? Wulfur asked her. We're going after him. Ela replied. He heard of a location where the Silver Hands are hiding, and he's out for blood. What location? Gallows Rock. A man there called Krev the Skinner is an old-time enemy of our kind. Spjor wants his head. Shit, let's go. Wolfer and Ela headed out to Gallows Rock, where Spjor should be. From the notes John left, this location is where Spjor may die. John and Serana traveled together through the woods of Falkreath for the first time in a few months. John was cloaked and hooded like the creepiest person on Nirn, and Serana's eyes were glowing in the dark like the second creepiest person on Nirn. What? I just had a word with my brother. Things seem to have diverted from the original plan again, John said. Serana looked at him and wondered how many plots can one man keep running all at the same time. Can you give me some advice? Serana asked. What? John paid attention to her sudden question. The way you do things, how often do things go wrong? Well, all the time. Huh. John couldn't help but let out a burst of strong laughter. Serana never expected this answer at all, since in her eyes, John was always the meticulous mastermind and the resourceful guy who knows his way around every problem. So, what do you intend to do with the Dark Brotherhood? Serana asked. John looked around the wood of Falkreath before deciding to reply. Astrid is hungry for power. She will try to get rid of you who she thinks is the listener, so she can remain in control of the sanctuary. Her little scheme is futile, though, since I am the real listener, John said very proudly. Serana narrowed her eyes before shrugging her shoulders, saying whatever, and following him along the woods. But the assassins still won't listen to you. They don't know who you are, and they have no intention to trust a stranger over Astrid. Serana said, Oh, I wouldn't worry about that if I were you. John said, back in the day, the Dark Brotherhood used to have a lot of traitors. Some caused great damage to the Order that they needed to perform a purification on whole sanctuaries sometimes. Purification? Like purging them all? Serana asked. Exactly. If the Black Hand suspects one traitor to be hiding within a certain sanctuary, and they pose a great danger to the entire Order, purging the bad stock would be better than infecting the whole field. John replied, But there are no fields anymore, and all the stock is in one barn. You burn it, and you have nothing left. Serana said, How so? John smiled. I have you. You know I don't intend to be your listener's substitute forever. I need to get my business done on my own. Serana said, Well, in that case, we have him too, John said nonchalantly. Him? Serana asked. Oh, your senses are so dull. John immediately moved his hand and broke a tree trunk. Squeak. Once he pulled his hand out, a figure of a man came out of the trunk and flew over as John flung him across the woods. John and Serana walked to the poor fellow who landed badly on his back, and he saw the creepiest pair on Nirn looking down on him. In truth, his appearance can count him as the third creepiest person on Nirn. Hello, Cicero. John spoke in a sinister, deep voice. Part 2. LL, listener. Lord listener. Oh yes, dear Cicero. Can you please put me down? Oh, poor Cicero, can I though? John wondered dramatically. Well, of course, you are the listener. Cicero said cheesily. You truly can't keep a gentleman like myself in an entertained mood. John complained. What use of you as a jester if you can't hold your ground being hanged upside down? The problem is, I'm lacking any ground to hold at the moment. Listener, don't get too smart with me, my dear. John flicked Cicero's forehead. Truth of the matter, dear listener, poor Cicero is not that good of a jester. He can be a servant. He could be a fool, but never could he jiggle balls or stand on ropes. You can jiggle blades just fine. John laughed unintentionally. Dear Cicero, no need to fear. I have only been testing you, but it seems you are a true servant worthy of praise. Your devotion, your sense of duty, and your incredible care of our mother all these years truly touched your little brother's heart. Truly? Oh, listener, how wonderful. You witnessed, you knew. Cicero was all alone, all lonely, but there was mother with me, and she never spoke. Oh, dear mother, she must be lonely now. She must be waiting. Listener, please, let me down so we can go and see her. Cicero spoke and whined. Of course, but you have to convince me first, Cicero. Convince me that I can put my trust in you, dear brother. John approached Cicero, but the latter couldn't see John's face under the cover of greed. I will. Cicero will prove himself to the listener, all for our sweet mother. Brother. Cicero spoke, and Sir Anna rolled her eyes from drama poisoning. You please me, Cicero. You truly do. John said in obvious ecstasy. Now tell me, how did you hold your urge in and didn't attack Astrid even though you know the rotten greed inside her? What? What do you mean? Cicero started to hesitate before answering. Oh, Cicero, my dear, you are breaking my little fragile heart. John turned around and put his hand on his head in an artistic pose of melodrama. Sir Anna, who was sitting by the fire, watched the two madmen and couldn't help but be amused with the performance John gave, so she started to pick up nuts and crack them with her fangs in harmony with the crackling firewood. As for Cicero, who was tied by a magic rope and hanging upside down from a tree, he was having very eerie vibes about John. Dear Cicero, please be truthful. Your answer means the world to me. John said, and repeated his question very seriously this time. You hate Astrid for the traitor she is, and you could have taken many swings at her lately. Why didn't you? What stopped you? In John's mind, very important questions were running around. First, Cicero the mad jester should have attacked Astrid before Sir Anna would go after the gourmet. This would lead Sir Anna to hunt him down before going after the gourmet. However, Cicero didn't act against Astrid, even though she keeps undermining the authority of the listener and the Night Mother all the time. On the other hand, Wulfur reported to John that Codlac Whitemane had died, despite the warnings they tried to give the companions. Moreover, Skjor the companions was supposed to die in the same quest when the player becomes a werewolf and joins the circle, but as Wulfur didn't accept to be a werewolf, Skjor didn't die. Still, once Codlac was killed, Skjor headed off to the place he was supposed to die in order to avenge Codlac, and will probably end up dying. Somehow, John hasn't figured out the formula of how to save people who were supposed to die in a game from dying. In the case of Wulfur, he killed Sibby Blackbriar, and it worked. In the case of King Torrig, he tried to warn him from facing Ulfric unprepared, but Torrig died. In the case of Vittoria Vici, he entered her life and tore her marriage apart before faking her death, and it worked. But that all depended on luck. So is it luck or fate that decides things? Why does the future feel like it is set in stone sometimes? And why doesn't it feel like that the other times? So, dear Cicero, why didn't you do it? John asked. Cicero wanted to. Cicero always felt like doing so. Oh, listener, Astrid always hated us. Cicero, that vampire, the listener, and our mother. Cicero said, but I knew there was something. Cicero knew. He can always tell that the vampire wasn't listening. The listener must be favored by the Night Mother, but she didn't act that way. She felt like lying but told words that are true, Cicero said before reciting the unholy words. Darkness rises when silence dies. Both John and Cicero spoke the words. Yes, the words. You say them, but you actually know what they are. But the vampire didn't understand them. I was fooled like Astrid and the rest, but I realized. Realized what? That the listener is walking among us in shadows. That he sees us, and we cannot see him, and whispers words to his speaker. That he knows everything. Cicero said, the Night Mother may not speak to me, but she shows me signs, and those signs were many. I could hear them, walking, trotting, snoring, yawning, scratching, watching, and growling. John and Sir Anna narrowed their eyes and looked at each other before raising their indexes as if they realized what Cicero was talking about at the same time. Hissing and purring sometimes? Sir Anna asked. Yes, sometimes. Cicero confirmed. I think I know what he's talking about. Sir Anna said. Right. John held his head as there was no use for Cicero anymore. With a swift swing, John cut off the rope tying Cicero and let the jester fall down on his back. Cicero landed with an expression of pain on his face, but he hurried up and freed himself quickly. "Listener, a listener, thank you dearly," Cicero said as he groveled to John's feet. But what is it? What is it that Cicero felt? What is it he heard? I was always trying to listen, but the signs were never as clear as before. I can't believe it. Serana held her head. Is it the unholy sweet maiden, the Night Mother? Did Cicero hear her signs correctly at last? It was a cat, you dumb moron, Serana said. He uses a cat familiar to infiltrate the sanctuary. That's what you always have been hearing. A cat. Cicero heard a cat. The cat was the sign. By oblivion, you stupid. Serana didn't take shit from Cicero and cuss it at him. A round of banter and madness started between Cicero and Serana while John sat alone thinking. Cicero was led to believe by his wild imagination that there are signs of a Night Mother going in the sanctuary, while it was just Nefertiti when he sent her out to communicate with Serana and spy on the assassins. Nefertiti usually values her privacy and doesn't seek attention, but she is usually playful. However, once she sticks to the shadows, it is very difficult to spot her by someone who isn't trained in shadow magic, which is a lost art. On the other hand, Cicero is a complete nutjob. He spent years hiding in Dawnstar Sanctuary and talking to corpse. While that would just be regular lunacy, he was always close to the influence of the Night Mother. His stealth and overall aptitude as an assassin are top-notch without relying on anything magical. John himself is not that good at stealth without relying on magic. Dark senses, Cicero has acquired something akin to that, but that still doesn't mean anything to John. What he wanted to know is how Cicero diverted from the main storyline without major interference from John, while the companions didn't divert that much with John's direct interference through Wolfer. Possibility? Future? Fate? Law of causality? I can't figure it out, John said. Serana and Cicero looked at him with questioning faces. Nothing, John said. My growth is stuck again, and I think the answer lies somewhere around a certain topic. It is not a problem now, but I'll need a long break later to organize my thoughts. Break? Serana asked how long. Not sure, John replied, but for the time being, I'll act based on the things I know. John cracked his fingers and chased the noisy thoughts away. Let's focus on purifying the Dark Brotherhood for now, John said. All right, Serana was happy to finally rid herself of those pesky assassins. Oh, listener, Cicero wishes to punish every last one of them. Please, allow me to be your hands and feet. Cicero said. Fine, but how can you trust me, Cicero? John asked. Listener, Cicero doesn't need to trust you. Cicero only needs to perform his duties as the keeper. The listener as well must keep to his duties. If any of us fail with that, trust will be the least of our problems. Cicero said in a menacing smile. John sighed, then turned to Serana. And you, I'll offer you an opportunity. John said. I'm listening, Serana replied. The Dark Brotherhood may be nothing now, but it is a group that has a lot of power when managed properly. They may not be much compared to the Fokihar clan, but you will get many benefits if you have any personal agenda you need to be done. John offered. I prefer independence, Serana said, and our promise to stop my father didn't include that. True, John nodded. But at the end of the day, you are a daughter of Cold Harbor. If Molag Bal decides to use his influence on you, you'll be nothing but a plaything that he can track and control as he wishes. Serana made a dejected face since bringing up Molag Bal's control over her was something she wasn't that much proud of. I mean, if your father asks any of Molag's servants to capture you, it will only be a matter of time, John said. But if you put yourself under the influence of another patron, the Night Mother, no, Sid has, John said. Sid has never limited the freedom of anyone since his chaos requires absolute freedom. On the other hand, his retirement plan is an eternity of darkness compared to Molag's entirety of servitude. I had my fair share of both darkness and servitude, Serana said. However, this time it will be on your terms, John added. Following Sid is much better than being subject to Molag Bal in John's opinion. However, oblivion is one thing, etherius is another, and siddhis is a whole different subject. Choosing between an afterlife of complete slumber within the domain of siddhis or choosing an afterlife of servitude as a subject of Molag Bal. Just to get away from Molag Bal, I will try this path to siddhis for now. Sarana decided to take the 7-day free trial option. All right, John replied. Now, to the most important subject. The reason why the Dark Brotherhood hasn't been functioning properly is there is no Black Hand. What exactly? Sarana asked. Oh dear, for you to not even know the basics. Cicero said. Cicero will educate you, vampire. Just the ruling council of the Dark Brotherhood. John said. Consists of a listener and 4 speakers who represent the thumb and the other 4 fingers respectively. I, the listener, am the thumb. Sarana, you could be the index finger. And Cicero, my liege. Cicero bowed. You are the keeper of the Night Mother, but because there are many vacant spots in the Black Hand, you will be the little finger. By your orders, Cicero lives and dies for the Night Mother. Cicero seemed actually very happy with the promotion. As every finger has a claw, each of you can have 1 personal assassin as your arms and legs. They will be your silencer, so pick them carefully and keep their identities to yourself and those you trust. I have my own silencer decided. John said. I'll recruit someone I have been keeping my eyes on. Sarana said. And Cicero will pick one after the purification is complete. Cicero said. Great. John stood up and asked, Sarana, I believe that Astrid gave you a spell book. Have you taken a look at it? Yes. Sarana handed over the book. She said that this spell was one of the last things she could salvage from the last Brotherhood hideout. It summons a spectral assassin from the void of siddhis. I summoned the guy, but he creeped me out. John opened the book, memorized the spell, then passed it to Cicero. Learn it. Yes, listener. Cicero understands. John kept muttering the words and skillfully cast the spell in a few minutes. There was no void when this conjuration happened. It was as if the void itself was forming something from nothing. A summon from outside the realms of known reality. Nerina would beat John up if he doesn't hand it to her for study. But that wasn't the case for now. The summon which formed in front of the group was taking the form of a ghost, yet with a very vivid look in his eyes and an outstanding ego in his behavior. The ghost walked out with confidence towards the campfire where the 3 gathered. I live. Again. John smiled as he finally met a soul that goes back to the events 200 years ago. The man who guided the champion of Cyrodiil when he was but a mortal assassin. The legendary Lucien Lachance. Chapter 650, Greed's Final Form. So, the listener, what is he like? Cicero asked. You really want to know? Sarana replied with a question. Of course, Cicero wishes to, unless that is something he is not supposed to learn. Cicero gave a smart reply. Well, I doubt he will keep his true identity a secret for long, but make sure to never cross him if you want to live. I haven't spent a lot of time in the outside world myself, but judging from the monsters I know, he doesn't lose to any of them. Sarana replied. Then, are there any plans we must follow as fellow speakers? Cicero asked. All the plans are running in his head. The question I've been meaning to ask is why did you give him your trust when it is just the first time you meet him? Sarana questioned. Oh, Cicero heard him say he is the listener. Of course, that's not all. Cicero is no fool. Not that kind of fool anyway. Cicero replied. Aren't you a vampire? Can't you smell? Smell what? Sarana asked. Death. Cicero replied. Death, life, and rebirth, all the sense on one man. No. Sarana couldn't understand what Cicero meant. Huh. Cicero laughed shortly before bursting in a longer laughter. Ha 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 ha. Don't you smell? He he he. Siddhis? As if he found the most interesting thing ever, Cicero spoke cryptically. You gotta talk less crazy and more sense before I knock some into you. Sarana threatened. Sense? Ha ha ha, but that's madness. He 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 he. As Cicero wasn't able to contain his laughter anymore, Serana ignored him and walked towards the sanctuary of the Dark Brotherhood. The two of them just took an order from John. Serana was to get ready for the Emperor's assassination plan, while Cicero would ready the Night Mother to be moved. As for him, he had personal things to get done first. Lucien Lachance, for those who don't know, and no one really knew who he was, Lucien was a man who lived 200 years ago in the time of the Oblivion Crisis, and he held the position of one of the Brotherhood speakers at that time. Lucien Lachance was said to be very devout to the cause, to the point where his death was legendary among the assassins. But before that, Lucien was the one who recruited the champion of Cyrodiil into the Dark Brotherhood back in the game previous to TSV, Skyrim, Tessive, Oblivion. During his time, Lucien Lachance led the sanctuary of Cheydinhal and discovered a traitor lurking within the ranks of the Brotherhood. While that traitor was unknown, Lucien ordered the entire sanctuary to be purified of all assassins, not even in a heartbeat, to ensure no loose ends would survive. Unfortunately for him, the traitor wasn't a member of the sanctuary, and his silencer, the champion of Cyrodiil, was manipulated by the original traitor to kill most members of the Black Hand, including the listener of the Brotherhood. This scheme led the remaining members of the Black Hand to suspect Lucien Lachance to be the traitor, since his silencer was the one doing the killing. Lucien was captured, hung up, tortured, castrated, and disfigured, all before slowly dying to the surviving members of the Black Hand. His silencer was spared and brought to the Night Mother with the rest of the Black Hand members. There, the Night Mother revealed herself and declared the innocence of Lucien Lachance, as the real traitor was none other than one of the Brotherhood's past victims that infiltrated its ranks, the Black Hand member, Matthew Bellamont. John recalled the information about those events and looked coldly at the ghost of Lucien Lachance. So, you have heard the tale of Matthew Bellamont and the great treachery of Cheydinhal. Kill a boy's mother, and vengeance festers in the sun, Lachance said. John looked up and down at Lucien. That's true. It is always better to not leave any loose ends. Thinking of how many loose ends John himself left, it was ironic of him to say it that way. Of course, it would be a shame letting loose ends bring harm to the innocents. Lucien said, if there was a face to a lawful evil, the Dark Brotherhood's assassins will always be one of those faces. Sadly, today's Brotherhood is more on the neutral side of things. Walk with me, Lachance, John said. Oh, you have something in mind? The Spectre asked. Aside from death and carnage, no, John replied. Good listener. A few minutes later, John and the spectral assassin headed towards the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary in Falkreath, and as they reached there, they stopped for a few minutes to observe the situation. So that's what the Brotherhood has been reduced to, the Spectre said. Thinking of some good, old purification, John asked, the Brotherhood always needs this kind of maintenance. Do you understand the risks of running a band of killers? Lucien asked. Enlighten me. John asked the Spectre to humor him. Same as all groups, the Brotherhood seeks to drive those who kill toward a certain goal with a certain power behind them. 200 years ago, the Night Mother knew the identity of the traitor among us all along, but she wanted us to be purified, to lose power, and to work again to regain it. So you do not become too powerful and start being ambitious. Spot on, listener. Spot on. Lucien said, the Brotherhood is considered a band of those who embrace chaos but decide to harness its same as all things that are cities. When these kinds of people fatten up, they lose their purpose too quickly. For that, they all have to be kept on the balance between struggling to survive and working to flourish. I don't mind the principle, John said. Then the Brotherhood has gained an excellent listener. The spectral assassin seemed delighted with the listener's answer, but he started to notice something. John was impossible to see through even for a dweller of cities like him. The thing that John was wearing, greed, was nigh impossible to see through. However, the thing started to feel agitated. Is this natural? As the spectral assassin asked, John looked at Greed, which he was wearing like a cloak, and noticed that Greed was acting up as if it was boiling. Come on, not again. At least not now. John became irritated as well. Lust replaced greed. The moonlight crystal anomaly, also known as lust, jumped off the storage cube and attacked the shadow anomaly, also known as greed. The two of them looked like liquids, solids, and gases all at the same time as they fought. Lust immediately took over greed and shed it off John. Lust changed John's appearance to that of the blankiest possible. As greed was tossed on the ground, it started to act up all over the place. John frowned with no features on his face and wanted to approach it, but greed suddenly stopped and took the shape of a sphere that floated in the air. Interesting thing. Aggressive, though. The spectral assassin commented. "Talk to me, buddy. What do you see?" John asked greed, that was unresponsive, as if not paying any attention to his owner. As its name suggests, greed is very possessive and cherishes materials, but it only devours shadows, unlike gluttony, which is a free-for-all devouring asshole. Lately, John had greed absorb a large quantity of shadow energy in the Temple of Meridia, which may have caused it to be energized and be ready for evolution. Now, it seems that greed has detected something that it seeks to devour. This is greed's third evolution. At this time, it is also supposed to manifest an ego and take a form. As the first sin created by John, it was the weakest for a long time since John created it when he wasn't that strong, unlike Envy, for example, who manifested all her three powers from the get-go. Greed, shadow devouring ether. Reform weapons. Perfect stealth. Greed started moving by itself in a buzzing, even few seconds, as if to find some resonance. The direction it was heading was the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary. "This will turn into an absolute headache," John said. "Chaos knows no bounds." The spectral assassin said in delight as it watched greed like watching something so Sithis-like. Eventually, greed approached the sanctuary's black door, but instead of going towards it, it took a turn to the right and continued forward for 30 feet. "I see." John and the spectral assassin both arrived at the same conclusion after witnessing the target greed was after. Beside the sanctuary's entrance, there was a small puddle of murky dark water that no living thing gathered around. While it felt like water at first glance, staring into it is like staring into the abyss. Stare into Sidh's brother, so that Sidh stares back into you. The spectral assassin came behind John and tempted him to look deeper. John's eyes remained focused on the dark puddle, and in his eyes, darkness spread and widened. A sneer appeared on his face as the puddle started to feel agitated because of his stare. John's smile widened, and the chaos infection within spread through his tattoos, which seemed as if his entire body was covered by them. "I've already been to the heart of chaos," John replied, and completely overcame the puny chaos gate in front of him. Interesting. The spectral assassin was delighted by John's aptitude for chaos, which in his eyes was unparalleled. "Quit playing tricks with me, LaChance." John spoke. "I see what greed wants. Call it." "I see." Lucy and LaChance nodded and walked ahead to the dark puddle before calling, "My old and dear friend, come to me." And just as he called, the response came with vigorous horse neigh. The sound of galloping was heard as from the small dark puddle. The void stretched to let out a harbinger of doom in the shape of a powerful steed, black as night with glowing red eyes as a vampire, Shadowmere. This horse is an icon for the Brotherhood, and one of the mysterious creatures known as Doom Beasts that were gifted upon the Brotherhood by Sidis. But today, this horse loved by most of the game players will have another name, Greed's Meal. The sphere-shaped Greed turned into something with many arms and latched on Shadowmere from its body, legs, and head. Shadowmere was one aggressive horse by nature and fought back fiercely, but when you are targeted by Greed's appetite, things don't tend to go well for you. Before it could even free a single limb, Shadowmere was down on the ground, completely immobilized and being dragged back by Greed to the dark puddle where it came from. John and the spectral assassin watched as the two monstrosities returned to the void and the dark puddle started boiling. John didn't make any sound, and remained hidden until the situation calmed down. "Something is coming," the spectral assassin said. "I know. It is greed," John replied. "It has grown and reached its potential. Just like when Shadowmere came out galloping with vigor. A different horse came the same way, but its appearance was much more menacing. Unlike the black red-eyed Shadowmere, this one was dark with black eyes almost as if it doesn't have any, and just a being that imitates a horse. But as its body fully emerged, it was clear that compared to the monstrous Shadowmere, this is an abomination on a new, different scale. An 8-legged horse, with 2 coming out where only 1 wound came, and its body was longer and much stronger. Greed, shadow-devouring ether. Reform weapons. Perfect stealth. Sleipnir, greed, ego. Sleipnir, John exclaimed. An 8-legged horse from the Norse mythology. It is the son of Loki and the steed used by Odin. Loki was the mother in that situation. That's so ugly. Even the spectral assassin had a thing or two to say about this product of greed and Shadowmere. John approached the greed's embodiment, Sleipnir, and put his hand on his neck, but the horse acted violently and bit John's arm. Seeing how it acted, John had an unamused look on his face. "I haven't tamed a horse in a very long while, and I happen to have some time on my hand." John held the horse's head, dragged it violently, opened a portal to the inside of the storage cube, and tossed greed in. "Lachance, follow among." John invited the spectral assassin in and walked after him to spend some time catching up with the talkative ghost and tame a horse along the way. Chapter 651, To Kill an Empire. So for those of you who want to see real life again, I've started reading it from the beginning to get my memory up to speed. I am thinking of continuing and contacting the story if still possible. Serana, dear, you killed the gourmet and made the people less merry, but the happiness you are bringing to the Brotherhood is worthy of a grand celebration. Astrid joined Serana's side and offered her wine as a toast, blood wine Argonian. "Thank you, Astrid." Serana received the cup and raised it up to sit his. Eagerly shouting the name of the dread father amidst the assassins like this is supposedly very normal, especially to a newcomer like Serana, but for the veterans, all of them had to make eye contact with Astrid first. Sure, Astrid raised her cup arbitrarily, to sit his, the Night Mother, and for our luckiest charm, the listener. Astrid seemed more than just okay, and so the rest raised their cups, some more enthusiastic than others, of course, but all very focusing on Astrid. "Family," Astrid called, and moved from Serana's side to the head of the table. "I know most of you here were waiting for this for a long, long time. Which one of you mean and vicious killers is the one to off the Emperor's life should be the greatest assassin alive? I mean, no disrespect, but most of you have been working on this mostly with reconnaissance, intel gathering, and planting dead drops. However, Serana here has made 3 major hits and skillfully delivered. Good girl." Astrid seemed satisfied with Serana and showed her favor. "Careful there. The rest of the kids will be jealous." Babette, the 9-year-old girl who was 9 for the last 300 years, spoke. "Oh, don't worry about that, Grandma." Festus Krex, who looks the oldest elder among the assassins, replied to Babette. "Quit it, you 2 old things." Astrid brushed their petty squabble off and continued. "Most of you have come for me to allow them the chance to take on the Emperor. It is a dangerous job, so you have to be extra careful. The plan is to infiltrate Castle Dour posing as the gourmet with his pass writ and poison the Emperor's food. The one we need is someone who can infiltrate and fit the appearance of the logical age." Astrid continued and eyed Babette. "Yes, just bully me because I am 9. Oomph." Babette acted all upset. "Well, this also excludes you, Festus, because your old ass is a bit of a problem." Astrid said, "Fine by me. I wouldn't poison the Emperor anyway." Festus said, "Who wants to take the honors?" Astrid asked the remaining members. Viezra the Argonian raised his hand. "Nope. You truly think the Legion will believe that an Argonian is capable of decent cooking?" Astrid outright refused him. "What about me?" Nazir the Red Guard asked. "I have my utmost faith in you, Nazir, but I prefer that you run the show rather than play in it." Your counsel is invaluable to me to send you on such a risky mission. Astrid refused him. Wife, I could do it. Arnjorn, Astrid's husband, said. No, you can't. Astrid refused him too in less than a heartbeat. I am an alchemist. Cooking isn't that hard for someone with my talents, said Gabriella the Dunmare. Really? Astrid spoke with an obvious mockery. Food from Morrowind either smells like feet, tastes like feet, looks like feet, actually just feet. So far, the process of elimination eliminated everyone except for two, Serana and Cicero. Of course, it is impossible for Cicero, since he tends to the Night Mother, and his overall personality wouldn't cut it for the job, which leaves Serana. She's obviously a vampire. Can she even cook? Well, she did most of the legwork on this. I know, but... Astrid, what do you say? The members argued a little and then left it for Astrid. I want Serana on this one. Astrid said, the honor will be hers. Serana put on a smile and remained silent. Astrid also smiled. Look at you all calm and confident. I do believe you were born for this task, dear. So let us begin. The final test of the final plan started, and all the assassins were working together on this one, even though it was a one-man job. The city has many access points, but we could only prepare one magical method to teleport in and out. If used once either for going in or out, it won't work again and will remove all traces. The location is here. Festus advised. After the siege of the Dragon Cult, the Legion is very serious about who walks in and out. The new Jarl is also cracking down on our friends from the Thieves Guild, so we couldn't fake any identifications. You will have to pose as the gourmet from the city gate all the way to the castle. Nazir advised. Since we're both vampires, I know how it feels on sunny days, especially when we don't walk in the shadows. Gabriella and I prepared a few lotions that can act as cosmetics and hide that you're a vampire. Also, this ring will change your eye colors and give it a natural color. Remember, don't use spells to hide your identity, since there will be a ton of Imperial wizards. Babette advised. Entering the castle is one problem. Reaching the Emperor is another. Make sure to act as natural, innocent, and clueless. Some nervousness and goofiness will cut it just fine. You're meeting His Majesty the Emperor after all. Focus on your attitude, etiquette, and language. In my opinion, try using the Brittonic dialect to give an extra sense of mystery. Gabriella advised. You can practice cooking from the gourmet's books or use your charisma to boss around the kitchen. The problem here will be adding the poison. Since the Emperor's security is the tightest on Nirn, and there will be someone to try the food before presenting it to him, you'll have to drop it in that instance. It has to be precise and lethal. Many eyes will be watching at that time. Viezra advised. I've stashed some weapons within the construction site outside the collapsed part of the castle at this location. Get to them if you need them. Arnjorn advised. Here, take this. It's called Jaren root. It's a rare plant, found only on the island of Strozum Kai. It can be served like any vegetable. All it takes is one taste, and the effects are quite immediate. The Emperor will be serving Sidhis before he even knows he's dead. Once he's been killed, escape through the upper door. It leads to the collapsed bridge, which is unguarded. There, you'll find a ton of ropes and scaffoldings. Don't hesitate when you get there and arrive at the evacuation point. Astrid advised. The plan was tight, risky, and daring. It depended on many variables, especially in the bit where Serana will be inside the castle, but she was capable enough to deal with that. So let's go for one final run. Nazir asked. Let's do it. Serana nodded and stood facing him. Halt! The city is closed by the Emperor's orders. State your business immediately. I have been summoned. Serana handed the writ of passage to the legionary on the gate, whose eyes widened upon the sight of the Imperial Legion seal. Hold on for a moment. An officer will guide you in. As the guard said, an officer hurried to the front gate and welcomed Serana with a group of 4 elite legionaries and 2 Imperial knights. Serana descended from her horse and carried her bag, which the officer insisted to carry for her as she was guided in. Seeing the mysterious gourmet, many were taken as she was a small young woman with rosy cheeks and firm eyes. Her smile was only on her lips, and her confidence was towering to the sky. Serana had her fair share of formalities a lifetime ago, so she had to play the role by her standards as a world-class mysterious chef, which is different from what Astrid wanted her to do. Confidence is the key. That's how everyone can waltz their way anywhere. Act like you belong, and you will belong. Serana was led through the city, up the castle, and was met with Commander Morrow. "So the gourmet, I will receive your writ of passage," Commander Morrow said, and escorted Serana on the way in. "I take it that the kitchen has been prepared?" Serana asked. "Yes. Chef Gianna has been preparing since the morning for your. Let's not waste time. You soldier types wasted enough of my time with your useless formalities already." Commander Morrow was taken by the attitude. "I apologize, but what?" Serana became more imposing. "Why are you wasting time? The Emperor's not going to feed himself." "The kitchen, Commander." "Yes." The Commander's face went dark, but he still complied. "This way." Serana followed Commander Morrow and arrived at the door of the castle's main tower. There, the Commander opened the door for her, and she stormed in. Following the scent of cooking, Serana found her way to the kitchen, walking ahead of the Commander, and walked in. As she ran into the first chef-like individual. "Changing room," she demanded. The man profoundly became confused from the imposing young woman walking in front of Commander Morrow, and paused for a second. "You deaf?" "Changing room," Serana demanded once again with a stronger character. "Right this way, ma'am." The young chef led the way. The man walked ahead as fast as his leg could serve him, and as he looked back, he saw the serious face of a young woman urging him forward, which made him almost lose his footing at the doorstep of the changing room. "Move aside." Serana walked in with her bag. Less than a minute passed, and walked out dressed completely like a chef. Once she did, she could see the Commander speaking with an imperial woman who was questioning about the young lady barging into her kitchen like that for the Commander to utter the gourmet, right before they saw Serana. "The gourmet? Oh, finally." When I heard the gourmet was being brought in to cook for the Emperor, I could hardly believe it. It's just, the head chef Gianna walked to Serana with smiles and checked her out. "Just what?" Serana asked. "A Breton? Gonna notice Serana's accent. Well, I just never expected the gourmet to be a Breton. It almost seems too obvious. Some of the greatest cooks have been Bretons and... All right, once you're done, tell me what in oblivion is this mess?" Serana pointed at the changing room. There were many lockers where the chefs changed their clothes for the kitchenware. However, the situation was messy and the room was unclean. "Oh," Gianna's face turned pale and yellow. Most of the assistants here are active Legion service staff. It is difficult to, but we keep them in line. Everything is very spotless. I can assure you that." "Assure me." Serana frowned. "Assure me by lining up your staff." Gianna lowered her head and stared with anger at the 7 assistants she had in the kitchen before telling them to stand in line. Serana walked ahead and looked at them one by one, causing a nervous situation, but then looked away and stood beside Gianna. This one, him, and that short guy," Serana said. "Yes," Gianna asked in a very nervous voice. "Send them to bathe," Serana stated. Commander Morrow was still present in the kitchen and was absent-mindedly watching how things unfold before telling the 5 men to walk out of the kitchen. Who remained were only Gianna and 2 assistants. "Let's get to work," Serana said. "We are pretty understaffed like this." Gianna nervously complained, but she found no remorse in the gourmet's gaze. "What are the orders?" Serana asked. "Oh, yes, but of course. Ahem. The Emperor has requested your signature dish, the potage le magnifique. I've taken the liberty of getting it started. But the cookbook only says so much, and everyone makes the potage differently. I would be honored if we could make it the gourmet's special way. The base broth is already boiled. We can get started right now. So, which ingredient should I add next?" Gianna asked. Historians recorded various conflicting accounts about this moment, player choices. One historical account, Good Choices, tells that the content was a carrot, a splash of mead, one nernroot, which is wonderful for the seasoning, and 1 cup of diced horker meat. Another historical account, Gianna's choices, tell that the content was a pinch of frost salts, some chorus egg for additional flavor, a sprig or 2 of thistle, and some good tomato paste. Lastly, there was a historical account, fucked up choices, that claimed that the content was a sweet roll, vampire dust for an earthly texture, a giant's toe for some reason, and a gold septim coin, which slightly metallic but delicious aftertaste. The historical accounts may differ, but the lethal ingredient in the potage le magnifique was definitely the Jaren root oil, which was slipped in by Sir Anna right after the Emperor's food taster tried the potage. The end result was as any would expect, the Emperor's death. Not the real Emperor, though, a body double as it was revealed later once he cornered Sir Anna at the tip of his blade. All along, this was a trap made by Commander Morrow to lure out the Dark Brotherhood that was targeting the Emperor and avenge his son, who was framed for a conspiracy to assassinate the Emperor and got killed by Sir Anna. To add more to the drama, this was also a trap laid by Astrid. She never had any plans to save Sir Anna after assassinating the Emperor, and all the escape routes were already busted. Astrid wanted no listener in her sanctuary, but she wouldn't have thought that Sir Anna would survive the ambush in Castle Dower by the preparations the real listener made for her. Also, by the time Sir Anna left the sanctuary, Astrid went ahead to find trouble with Cicero and get rid of him, but things didn't go as planned. Cicero seemed to have gone missing even though the coffin of the Night Mother was still there. Cicero would never leave the coffin unattended, and no one had a clue where he went. That night, the Falkreath Sanctuary of the Dark Brotherhood was supposed to be attacked by the Imperial Legion. However, long before that attack would come, strange things started to happen in the sanctuary. Arnjorn's forge would heat up on its own, Babette's pet spider would start getting agitated and spit venom if left unattended. Gabriella's alchemy station would start producing smokes and flames, as if possessed by something. The spectral assassin would reveal himself and make some evil laughter that would echo wherever he goes. And the doors around the sanctuary would shut and open themselves magically, which made Festus Crex keep casting spells on them to keep them from trapping the assassins. In all of that and much more. Something was very wrong in the sanctuary, but the cold-blooded assassins didn't really panic until they realized that the black door, the one that leads in and out of the sanctuary, was not opening at all. A curse? A punishment? A retribution? All eyes landed on Astrid, questioning her about what she has done to the listener and the Night Mother's keeper. They all knew it, but no one uttered them. Yet that wasn't the end. The black door of the sanctuary opened once, and someone walked in. As the assassins rushed out to see what was going on and held the door, they were stunned to see that it was Cicero who returned carrying the unconscious Sir Anna. And the door was shut once again, trapping the assassins in again. At this moment, the assassins realized that the enemy was here, and, as Cicero told them, he walks among us. Chapter 652, Among Us 1. He walks among us. The fuck you mean with that? Who walks among us? He whispers. He speaks to whom he chooses, and his choice is absolute, and his will is that of the Dreadfather, the will of Sithis. I'll kill this fucking clown. Stop it, Arnjorn. Festus Crex spoke as he tried to hold Arnjorn's arm-ass. The sight of Cicero dragging Sir Anna into the sanctuary brought disorder among the assassins who failed to open the door after it was closed again. Fuck, it's not budging. Viezra punched the black door with frustration. Everyone was falling apart one way or another, and Astrid was watching all of this from behind them all. She saw the spreading madness and couldn't endure it anymore. Silence. Her voice was strong enough to make all the assassins fall in line. They all looked at her and remembered who is the real authority around here. Carry the listener inside. She spoke to Arnjorn, then turned to Viezra. Apprehend Cicero. No. What are you doing? Mad woman. Mad and bad. You know who I am, what I am. I am the keeper of the Night Mother. Cicero squirmed, but Viezra pressed him against the wall with a knife to his throat. Astrid, please act carefully. Festus Crex spoke to Astrid with a worried face. Take Cicero inside. I'll question him. Astrid said, and the entire group moved to the sanctuary's hall in the center of the sanctuary. Serana was laid on a table, and Cicero was brought in while held by Viezra and Nazir. Speak, clown. Who are you? Astrid asked calmly. Me? Cicero went out to follow the listener. Cicero was worried and had a feeling she would. Slap. Keep speaking like that, and you will regret it. Astrid slapped Cicero hard and continued. Where were you? Cicero had an unpleasant look in his eyes after having his face struck like that, but under the grasps of Viezra and Nazir, he was helpless for now. Cicero went to solitude. Cicero replied, Insubordination. You acted against my commands. Astrid said, Cicero acted to be good for the listener. Good for the Brotherhood. That's what we should do. Follow the listener, not send them out to die. It's the listener. The listener. Slap. Enough with your lies. Astrid didn't accept to even hear him out. You, Val bastard, have done something to our sanctuary. Fix it now, or else. What? Done something? Cicero has done nothing. Cicero is innocent. Cicero pleaded innocence, but many judging looks were in the eyes of those around him. Astrid didn't seem to be taking Cicero's answers even into consideration and had no intentions of believing him as she raised her hand to strike him once again. Astrid, enough. Babette stood in front of Astrid, urging her to stop. You're taking it too far. Even Nazir, who was holding Cicero, had to intervene. What are you two doing? Viezra looked at the two with anger. This clown is up to something, and you're standing up for him against our mistress. Cicero was out there to retrieve the listener, Lizard. Festus argued with Viezra. She is the listener, and he is the keeper. Please, don't you see you are making our problems worse? Even Gabriella stepped in. Astrid, listen, please. Nazir spoke. Don't antagonize him before we hear him out. You all have gone mad. Armjorn, on the other hand, seemed to be going to get aggressive now that the house is divided against his wife. Seeing everything simply going to madness and all the assassins reaching out for their blades, Astrid felt that everything would go south if she can't control the circus at such a moment. Fuck it. All of you stand down. She shouted and walked between them all. Gabriella, go deal with that alchemy lab of yours. Babette, your spider is going crazy. Kill it or calm down. Husband, control that heat coming out of the forge. Viezra, do something about the black door. And Festus, just go fix the doors or something. Astrid shouted at all of them and pushed them away. She then looked at Nazir, who kept his hand on Cicero's shoulder, and Serana, who was lying motionless. I'm not sure what is going on here, but you don't speak to me like that ever again. Astrid warned Nazir. Yes, mistress. Nazir said with a dejected look on his face. And you? She then looked at Cicero. You will explain yourself from the beginning. Astrid always suspected Cicero to be plotting against her, and seeing how the others acted, her suspicions turned out to be true in her eyes. She really wanted to incriminate Cicero, somehow, but the situation was against her since the sanctuary was not functioning well. As for Cicero's answers, they were indeed mad, but they would make sense eventually. Cicero made it clear that he doesn't trust Astrid either, since she is hijacking the position of the leader from the listener, especially after sending listener Serana to her death. Cicero claimed that he went to Solitude and saved Serana before escaping together and heading back to the sanctuary. As for everything else that is happening, Cicero said that he has no idea what is what, but what he is sure of is that they are not alone and the whispers of Sid-His are echoing in the sanctuary. It is as if the sanctuary became haunted with the anger of Sid-His, and who is to blame other than the one who drove the listener to a corner? But how can he hear those supposed whispers of Sid-His when we can't? Nazir asked. The question is, my dear manly Redguard friend, how can you not? Cicero answered. Don't speak in circles, clown. Nazir said while aiming his blade at Cicero's nose, I am warning you. What? What do you want me to say? Said Cicero looking at Nazir's blade without being really threatened. As I said, once the whispers of Sid-His are heard, and Cicero has always been hearing them. Brother, always, those whispers will never stop. He's a nut job, Astrid. Nazir turned to Astrid and withdrew his blade from Cicero's face. A nut job that is the keeper of the Night Mother. I advise you to be cautious, but he wasn't here when it all happened. I don't want to deal with more nut jobs than what we already have. Astrid looked at Cicero fiercely. Speak, clown. How did you open the black door from the outside when no one can open it from the inside? I don't really know. Cicero spoke the words, and that's it. Opened. The door, oh the door. I'm telling you, Astrid, it is not the problem here. Cidas walks, and he is angry. Cicero said, I'm done with him. Astrid turned away and left Cicero with Nazir. You believe Cicero, don't you, brother? Cicero asked Nazir with broken expressions. Nazir didn't reply until Astrid left off and looked around to make sure that nobody was hearing. I know there is something wrong, Nazir said. I knew it was wrong long before either you or even the listener would show up in here. Oh, the Red Guard knows. The wise man of the desert. Cicero clapped. Cicero is pleased. The listener will be pleased too, and our sweet, sweet mother is surely pleased. Yeah? I argue otherwise. Nazir said and moved away. Of course, he was talking about the way Astrid managed the Brotherhood. She wanted to be the leader of this sanctuary and not answer to anyone, be it a listener or the Night Mother, or even Cidas himself. This was clear especially when the 5 tenets of the Brotherhood were abolished by her not long after the fall of the last listener, Alexandre Dupre. But to Cicero, this situation was perfect, and the plan laid down was in motion smoother than ever. He turned to the collapsed Serana and smiled. Rest well. Cicero then left her unattended and hurried to the chamber where the Night Mother and her coffin are. No one really noticed so far, but the coffin of the Night Mother was closed and sealed by powerful magic. No one would suspect this since Cicero would attend to the coffin very zealously and go completely nuts if one was to approach the Night Mother when the coffin is open. As Cicero walked into the coffin's room, he smiled. His smile was just thin, curving, and wide that his ecstasy was overflowing all over. Every fiber of his being was so joyous to the point where he couldn't help but sing as he took off his jester hat. Sneaky, sneaky, stabby, stabby, the cat creeps through the abbey. Cicero carries the sneaky cat. She tells him to raise his hat. The cat walks out to start a slaughter, for she is the listener's daughter. Yes, how wonderful. Cicero is pleased. He. Nefertiti manifested through Cicero's hat and landed on the floor. She started licking her hand and cleaning her face before making sure everything was in order and moving out to do her tasks. Cicero watched Nefertiti with absolute fascination and wonder before taking his notebook and scratching a few notes about her elegance and grace. He even tried to pat her head, but she reacted badly. Hiss! Hands off, mortal! The cat spoke, and the mortal jester was stunned. Homan said not to kill you, but don't tempt me, ow. Yes, Cicero understands. Cicero replied and watched her set off. In all his days, never was Cicero spoken to by a cat that is not a caseate. But that was just a mere distraction from the original goal. Cicero remembered what he had to do, and his thin, wide, and menacing smile curved his lips up again. Mother in the coffin, speak to the listener some more often. Make your whispers heard by all, and your children will heed your call. Ha 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 ha. Cicero was finding it hard to contain his feelings as he slowly calmed down and dusted off his hat before putting it back. He then swiped his hands over his face, and all his expressions turned to the utter sadness of the clown. While he was busy fantasizing, the sanctuary was going through one uproar after the other. The heat of the forge that Armjorn works was rising gradually, and he had to maintain it every few minutes so it wouldn't cause a big fire. The alchemy lab was having a similar problem as residues of the poisons brewed by the assassins were evaporating and causing the pet frostbite spider of Babette to act aggressively. The doors of the sanctuary would open and close themselves from time to time, randomly, and sometimes would lock people in if left unwatched. But most importantly was the black door that Viezra tried everything with and the spectral assassin who would show up and go away every once in a while with creepy laughter. For the assassins could think of, the sanctuary was going through some setbacks that even their magician Festus Crex was unable to fix. "The door is not budging," Nazir said as he and Viezra tried all sorts of door-busting techniques with the black door. "It won't work." Astrid joined them and commented on their pointless actions. "The black doors have powerful seals which only open when you answer their questions accordingly." "There got to be something," Viezra said. "Could it be that someone has changed the word?" But Cicero said that he came in after saying the same words we say. Nazir argued, "It is something else, Astrid. Something far beyond us." Astrid became burdened with more thoughts and seemed like waiting to retreat away from this disturbing reality. "Tell Arnjorn to try and deal with the door, Nazir. As for you, Viezra, go see if Cicero, never mind. Go see if Gabriella or Festus need help," Astrid said and walked back to her chambers. Stunned as all the other assassins are, the matron of the Falkreath sanctuary barely could put on a composed facade that crumbled right away as she closed the door behind her. She couldn't help but feel burdened by something nobody else knows. She had indeed sent Serana to an escapable situation up north in Solitude. She didn't just plan for Serana's demise, but she reported the assassination attempt carried away by Serana to Commander Morrow, meaning that the man was waiting for Serana from the start. Yet seeing how she survived sent shivers down in Astrid's bones and caused her to feel like she was double-crossed by the commander who didn't seem to have killed Serana. In her mind, Astrid understood the situation as follows. Serana went to assassinate the Emperor and Commander Morrow was expecting her. Fueled by his desire to protect the Emperor and avenge his son, the commander should have obliterated Serana the moment she walks into the city, but somehow Serana survived and returned back with Cicero, who secretly followed her as backup on his own initiative. Things are fucked up in ways even Astrid can't dare to imagine. If Cicero wasn't careful, and that's a big if, he would have been followed by the Penitus Oculatus. Now the listener is lying down unconscious, the sanctuary is going crazy, and the assassins are split into three sides. Ostrud, Viezra, and Armjorn on one side, Babette, Festus, and Gabriella on a neutral side, and now Cicero, Serena, and probably Nazir on the side that is questioning Astrid's actions. "We need to evacuate the sanctuary." Astrid spoke to herself. There are many hideouts where the low-ranking recruits use. That would be her plan until the situation is over, at least. Still, it would have been a good plan if the following didn't happen. It all began when Astrid heard a high-pitched scream. She took her blade and rushed out, as well as all the assassins in the sanctuary. Astrid was the last to arrive, as she had to go across the main hall, where Serana was resting, and arrived at the hallway between the main chambers and the Night Mother's chamber. There, all the assassins were gathered around something, or someone. That someone was lying down on their back in a puddle of their blood, and a deep wound across their chest. Viezra, the Argonian assassin, was dead. One dead assassin between 7 suspects in the inner sanctum of the Dark Brotherhood sanctuary. Chapter 653, Among Us Too. Chapter 653, Among Us Too. Ramadan Kareem, everybody. Happy holy month to y'all out there, Muslims and non-Muslims. Red heart, red heart, red heart. Fasting is going to be tough this year, since the heat will come back at sometime mid-April for the Mediterranean basin. Raised fist, raised fist, raised fist, stay hydrated. Either way, I'll keep the work rolling, and I may continue our SDUM soon. May God bless us with success and fortune, and send down upon us the capacity of peace and love within our hearts. Amen. Palms up together. Viezra the Argonian was killed and lying in a puddle of his own blood. 7 killers stood around him, but none seemed like the one that killed him, for they all showed absolute innocence. Astrid stood one between the 7 and watched every action and reaction the others did in silence. Gabriella, Festus, Babette, Arnjorn, Nazir, and Cicero. Due to personal bias, Astrid checked Cicero thoroughly, but there was not even a single hint of blood on him. The others were also innocent, and had no reason to kill Viezra. "This is getting to utter madness," said Festus the mage. "The sanctuary is turning mad, and now we have a killer in our midst." "You can't say that." Babette found his words dangerous and wanted to shut him up. "Think about it. The sanctuary is acting like this must be due to a vengeful intent of a powerful being. Such beings can mislead and possess lesser beings like us. The killer may be among us, but they are not one of us currently." Festus insisted. "Shut up, you old fool." Nazir didn't like the words Festus spoke either. "Everyone shut up." Astrid shouted at them and sat down on one knee in front of Viezra, who was a dear friend to her. "Who found him first?" Astrid asked. "Me. I did," Gabriella replied as she seemed disturbed by the death of Viezra. "She could be the one who has killed him," and screamed. Festus said, "How can you say such a thing?" Nazir shouted at Festus. "Cicero thinks you all should calm down and look for clues." Cicero meekly started talking. "It could have been that clown." Arnjorn pointed fingers toward Cicero. "What?" "Cicero didn't do anything. Cicero was just tending to the Night Mother." Cicero said. "Astrid, you believe this madman?" Arnjorn asked, as if eager to get rid of Cicero. "Hey," Babette called. "Or maybe you could have done it and came to blame poor Cicero. Tell me, Wolfman, you were supposed to be at the sanctuary's door. How come you are here even before Astrid?" Cicero flipped the accusation towards Arnjorn. "Hey," Babette called again. "I was back for some tools when I heard the scream." Arnjorn defended. "And you're the one being suspicious. Isn't this at the doorstep?" "Hey, asshats!" Babette shouted this last time, taking everyone's attention towards her. Looking at the 300-years-old child, some felt the urge to entertain the possibility that she is the killer, and others begged for her to say something less sinister. But Babette pointed towards the main hall of the sanctuary and spoke the words that let them lose it from fear. "The listener is missing." As an immediate action, the group of 7 all turned towards the place where listener Serana was supposed to be lying and couldn't recover from the shock until Astrid herself spoke. She was there just now. With this remark, the situation and the suspicion started to shift in directions no one here was able to predict. "Listener, dear listener, where are you?" In a burst of panic, Cicero ran towards where Serana was last seen and looked around for her like a madman. "The vampire girl. Can it be her?" Arnjorn spoke, but Astrid turned to him with a death glare, telling him to shut up. "Not the vampire girl, the listener. Show some goddamn respect, you mutt." Festus Krex shouted at Arnjorn to keep him in check. "Why you?" Arnjorn wasn't really in the mood to be lectured, so he faced Festus head-on, but this confrontation was cut short as Astrid walked past through the two, with her focus directed on the listener's whereabouts. "Move Viezra out of here," Astrid said. "Band together and look for the listener. I want all of you to be within sight of each other." None of this made any sense. Astrid started to think that this scheme was played by Serana and Cicero. If they survive Commander Morrow at Solitude and plan this together, this would be the only thing that makes sense. But Astrid can no longer point fingers freely since she has lost the support of many members already with the existence of the listener, the supposed leader of the Dark Brotherhood. Long ago, Astrid managed to convince her sanctuary members that there was no need for the Night Mother orders or the 5 tenets if there is no listener to lead them, and thus, she appointed herself a leader of an independent sanctuary, which happened to be the last remaining standing Dark Brotherhood sanctuary. It meant that she is the leader of everything Dark Brotherhood related. But this changed with Cicero's arrival, who kept the Night Mother all of these years. Then the listener was chosen, and this whole mess started. Thanks to who? Cicero and Serana? Or Astrid? Those who are at fault easily realize the fault they are in, but something makes them defy admitting their mistake. Pride. Astrid didn't want to be seen as a small and insignificant assassin who backs off when shit goes down. This kind of life isn't kind to those who step back. Even against the Dread Father and the Night Mother, shit has to be taken all the way through. She had to kill them, Serana and Cicero, while they were busy aiming for her life. Hunting the hunter is a thrilling concept to say the least. Let's get going. For the coming hour or so, Astrid tried to move together as a group. Serana was still missing, and Cicero was weeping to the point where she wanted to just get rid of him immediately. They looked everywhere, from the laboratory to the living quarters, to the main hall, to the Night Mother chamber, to the Astrid's quarters. They didn't leave a spot unchecked, but they found no clue on the whereabouts of Serana or the killer of Viezra. "We can't keep going like this," Babette complained. "The forge's fire is burning hot, and the alchemy lab is emitting poisonous fumes. Are you going to keep things like this for long? Someone sabotaged our sanctuary on purpose to keep us separated." Astrid said, "I have a plan. I just need time." "We don't have time," Gabriella retorted. "If the poison fumes spread, forget about time. We will be in the grasps of cities." "Ugh, fine." Astrid couldn't handle this more than that, and had to cut some slack. "Everyone will be within the line of sight of one another while we deal with this." Astrid then assigned the assassin as follows: Festus to keep an eye on the doors inside the living quarters and prevent them from acting wild with his magic. Gabriella would keep an eye on him from the alchemy lab and deal with the poison fumes, since it is her expertise. Nazir would guarding the hallway between the living quarters and the Night Mother chambers. Babette would hold the passway between the lab and the main hall to keep an eye on Gabriella. Arnjorn will go to the smithy in the main hall and control its intensifying fires, while watching Babette. And the last would be Cicero, who was told to stay put in the main hall despite his protests and demand to prioritize looking for the listener. The whole thing with Cicero's placement was due to Astrid's distrust of him, which will keep him under the sharp senses of her werewolf husband Arnjorn, the vampire Babette, and the Redguard Nazir. As for Astrid, I will check the Night Mother's chamber myself, then find a way with the black door somehow. Astrid didn't seem confident, but she still had some tricks in her sleeves to try out. Some of the secrets she knows as the matron of Falkreath Sanctuary and all. She went into the Night Mother's chambers, and for some reason, Cicero was oddly quiet. He who would throw a tantrum if a single speck of dust came within close proximity of the Night Mother's coffin. When Astrid walked into that chamber and scanned it carefully with her dagger in hand, she couldn't find a single trace of suspicion so that she could use it against Cicero. His living quarters were also clean, without a trace of any clue as well. The last thing that Astrid needed to look into was the Night Mother's coffin itself. Astrid believed in the Night Mother who used to control the Brotherhood and all, but beyond that, this woman was just a corpse, a medium for the dread Father Cities. Putting aside the noises of the thoughts she had, Astrid reached out to the Night Mother's coffin and pulled its doors. But the doors didn't open and the coffin remained sealed. There was a secret keyhole in the pattern of the coffin, but Astrid had no time to try and unlock it. Cicero will surely make the situation look bad for Astrid if the seals were undone. Astrid retreated away from the coffin and walked out of the chamber back to the main hall outside. Found nothing in there. She spoke to her husband. "I'll keep an eye on the entrance and try to figure out something about the black door." "All right, be careful," Arnjorn replied. As Astrid headed out to the entrance, Cicero kept watching her closely and then focused on Arnjorn, who was keeping an eye on Cicero as well. Babette watched the two from her spot and felt the situation getting on her nerves before exchanging eye contact with Nazir, who nodded to her, meaning that he will be going back to check on Festus. Just as he turned around, Babette saw Astrid coming back where she came from. She walked past Arnjorn and headed towards Babette. "Where are you going?" Babette asked Astrid. "Worry about the others, dear," Astrid replied, showing dejection towards the fact that she is being questioned. "I'm just looking for a spell that old Festus may or may not know." As Astrid walked by Babette, the latter took a step ahead and asked one more question. "Between you and me, are you really concerned for the listener? We've been together for long, long years, and you're not having a hold of this. Going against the will of Sid is foolish," Babette advised. It seemed that Astrid and Babette went way back for Babette to wait for Astrid and tell her such words. Indeed, surprisingly, Astrid agreed. "All right." Babette felt something fishy about the answer. "But the listener isn't my concern as much as you all are at the moment," Astrid continued. "If you all can be saved, I'll first make sure that you do survive. Time will tell. Astrid's words made her seem pessimistic and cold, but somehow still the Astrid who feels for her family, not someone who became cold and drunk on power. Glad that you're still with us, Babette said as Astrid walked off the lab where Gabriella is and went down the living quarters where Festus is. It all became quiet for the next couple of minutes before it wasn't anymore. It became noisy, frightening, and chaotic all in a mere second when a scream was heard echoing deep from the sanctuary. The voice felt like Festus and came from the living quarters. "What is that?" Cicero questioned, but Arnjorn glared at him. "You stay put. Move, and I'll split your skull." Arnjorn aimed at Cicero with an axe before standing at a distance not too far from him. As for Gabriella, Nazir, and Babette, they headed towards the living quarters and entered from two different entrances to check on what was happening. "Festus, where are you?" shouted Gabriella, who was the closest to Festus. "Old man," shouted Nazir. "Where is Astrid?" "She was just here," shouted Babette. As the three entered the room first, they could find neither Festus Krex, whose voice was just heard, nor Astrid, who had just walked in. As their voices became louder, a fourth joined them in the room. "What's going on here? Where's Festus?" Gabriella, Nazir, and Babette all turned around towards the voice that came from the lab entrance. "Astrid, you're here," Gabriella reacted. "Festus has disappeared," with a loud scream. Nazir reported right away. "What?" Astrid frowned. "Hold up right there." But Babette seemed to have something to say. "Astrid, how are you coming from here?" "What?" Astrid became confused. "What do you mean? You just walked past me while I was on my post. You said you were coming to see Festus." Babette said. "What are you talking about?" Astrid retorted. "I was trying to figure something out with the black door until I heard a scream." Astrid walked into the room and descended down to the dining place where Babette and Gabriella were. "What are you talking about, Babette?" Gabriella asked. "I didn't see her coming from your direction." "Are you kidding me?" Babette said, while displaying anger towards Gabriella. "I am wise enough not to do so." Gabriella raised her hands meekly. "But if she would walk past you to the living quarters, she must have passed behind me. There is no other way unless she came from Nazir's direction. I didn't go past any of you. I just stayed there until I heard screaming." Astrid defended herself. Then Babette thought, "How just—" "I heard Festus talking with someone," said Nazir. "I thought it was you, Gabriella." "No," Gabriella denied, "and I had an eye on him. He talked to nobody." "That's impossible." Nazir seemed doubtful. "Are you all kidding me?" Astrid angrily shouted. "You can't even look over your shoulders? You can't discern whether there is an enemy in our midst or not." Babette watched that and spoke. "But you said that if all of us can be saved, you will make sure that we get to, and you agreed with me when I told you it is foolish to go against the will of Sithis." The three individuals around looked at her. Babette seemed to have had a conversation with that supposed Astrid, and some words were said that do not align with what the usual Astrid would display. Astrid would never openly oppose the Dreadfather, but she would never admit that it holds any significance to her. "I didn't say any of that," Astrid said. "Right?" Babette nodded. "You wouldn't. Just when things couldn't get any more dramatic, it simply did with a metallic noise and two strong thuds. Both the doors of the dining hall, from the lab and the hallway between chambers, were forced shut, trapping Astrid, Babette, Gabriella, and Nazir inside. "Fuck!" shouted Nazir. Everyone ran to the doors panicking, but the only way to open them was to force them open with magic. "I know a spell. I'm just not good at it," Gabriella said. "Hurry!" shouted Astrid. "Arnjorn is out there with that clown freak." Astrid wanted to hurry up to her husband, who was now stranded alone with Cicero, the one that Astrid suspects, but as Gabriella cast her magic. Roar! A mighty roar of a werewolf. Something happened, and Arnjorn seemingly morphed into his beast form. Click! Gabriella's unlocking spell worked in its second attempt, and Astrid rushed out blade in hand, leading the other three. The four immediately paused. However, When they saw Arnjorn as a werewolf looking at them without any ferocious hint in his eyes, they paused in relief. "Husband, where's the CLO?" As Astrid wanted to confirm that everything is still all right and took the first step towards her husband, her surroundings darkened in a blink. It was too sudden. It was too quick. It was too frightening. The alchemy lab exploded from the unlifted pressure in its tubes, rushing out a burst of chemical gases that caused all the lanterns, torches, and blazers to dim in a greenish hue. Astrid was pushed ahead, Babette hid under a table, and Nazir held Gabriella and jumped back into the living quarters. During that burst of darkness, Astrid could see only thanks to the intense flames of the forge that survived the gas's release, and the silhouette of her husband Arnjorn was clear in his werewolf form. But as she saw that, something lifted her husband up in the air and tossed him into the fire of his own forge. Thud, 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 and the sound of heavy thuds vibrated through the sanctuary. Chapter 654, Among Us 3. Chapter 654, Among Us 3. The disappearance of Festus, the timely trap in the living quarters, the eruption of the alchemy lab, and the attack on Arnjorn. Someone timed everything very perfectly for Astrid to witness. Those were her thoughts as she crawled up and ran to the forge where her werewolf husband was struggling inside, before dragging him out of it without minding the burn she suffered. The werewolf was in clear pain and agony, but Astrid couldn't just stand there. She pushed him with all her might across the dark hall to the opposite side, where a water stream made a small pond inside the sanctuary. She immediately ran with him into the water and put him down to extinguish the flames that were eating him alive. "Bjorn, Bjorn, calm down. Easy, easy, love. Please." Astrid screamed out of her wits as she tried to stop Arnjorn from moving, but he wasn't feeling good and struggled like a wounded beast before finally becoming quiet. The gases from the explosion started to slowly dissipate, and light started to brighten through the sanctuary once again. The sight of Arnjorn became visibly clear to Astrid, who sat on her knees in front of him, drenched in water and bearing many burn marks from entering the forge and moving the burning werewolf. "No!" Astrid's shoulders collapsed, and her face turned dumbfounded and pale. Her blonde hair was all wet, and her eyes were bloodshot. "No!" She put her hands on the body of the dead werewolf. He, who was charred black from the intense fires and died a painful death, was her husband and only true family in the world. And lo, screaming from the pain of her loss, the three assassins who were just with her joined her in the hall. Babette walked to her, and Nazir supported Gabriella to walk up. By the sands, Nazir saw what had become of Arnjorn and sighed. Thud! A strong sound vibrated through the sanctuary and made the place shake from its power. "It is coming from outside," Babette said as she saw the dust coming from above. "Astrid, get it together. I'll see what that is." Nazir helped Gabriella down and headed towards the entrance of the sanctuary. "Astrid, we need you with us." Gabriella spoke to Astrid, but the latter was completely frozen in front of her husband's body. "Hurry, no time left to waste." Babette dragged Astrid from her shoulders and got her out of the water, but Astrid only looked around like a lost person. "You're all right?" Astrid asked. "Who?" Gabriella asked back. "That damnable man, the keeper. Cicero, where is he?" Astrid said with the blade of woe in her hand. Surely she meant no good towards the mad jester. "It is the Legion." Nazir came back running. "Legion soldiers are trying to break into the sanctuary with a battering ram. The black door won't fall." Babette said, "It won't be broken unless they have the words." They said the words, but it seemed the black door wouldn't work from outside either. Nazir said, "Then we are safe until we flush out the traitor. We are safe." Astrid still insisted on the idea of a traitor and looked around till she saw a blood trace. It led to the hallway between the living quarters and the Night Mother's chamber up through the stairs, and all she needed was to get there and do the deed. Astrid walked out, shaking, limping, and devastated. The remaining three followed her, and all entered the hallway. There they saw Cicero at its end. He was lying on the ground, with 2 claw marks running deep through his chest. Mother, mother, answer me, was I full of hearts, worthy, or it was all in vain, to vain? Cicero hallucinated from his injuries, which seemed to have been caused by Armjorn. But Cicero wasn't alone, and he was receiving treatment by someone Astrid wanted to see so badly. Someone whom she wanted to blame as much as Cicero. Her agent turned listener. Sir Anna, I see that it is just the 4 of you. Sir Anna said, Traitor, Astrid called. Me? Sir Anna smiled. Too bad. You've got the wrong person. My husband is dead. Astrid shouted. Viezra is dead. She shouted again. Festus is gone. She shouted last. And that's upsetting you? Sir Anna asked. I should have never accepted the likes of you. Astrid glared with hate. Neither the likes of you nor the likes of him. Astrid took one first painful step towards her vengeance. But neither I nor he killed any of your people. Shut up. Neither I nor he betrayed the Brotherhood. I said shut up. Astrid jumped towards Sir Anna, knife in hand, but just as she did so, a shadow struck her and pushed her from the hallway into the Night Mother's chambers. She landed by rolling on the ground and could hardly stand up afterward. The shadow that struck her disappeared, and the ones who ran for her were her 3 assassin subordinates. Sir Anna, stop this. Gabriella shouted. I didn't do anything. Sir Anna walked into the Night Mother's chamber while helping the injured Cicero to stand. Then why did you do all this? Nazir asked with a hand on his sword's hilt, ready to fight at a moment's notice. There is a traitor in our midst indeed, Sir Anna said, but it is neither me nor Cicero. We only followed the orders of the listener. The listener? Astrid recovered from her daze and heard Sir Anna's words. So, you weren't a listener? No, Sir Anna replied. I am a member of the Black Hand. All right, and I always answer to the one true listener of the Dark Brotherhood. Cicero as well. He answers to the listener too. It is by his orders that this sanctuary was to be purified. Purified? The word ran through the tongues of every assassin in the sanctuary as they shuddered from its true meaning. 14 years ago, this sanctuary was under the threat of purification by the last known listener, Alazan Dupré, but they were barely spared. But now came a new listener and a new threat of purification, something that they wanted to avoid. You don't have a right to, Astrid said as she could barely stand and looked at Sir Anna with anger. I am the leader of this sanctuary. I won't allow. Thud. The sanctuary shook again after another strike from the battering ram, making the looming danger seep through their hearts. Astrid, Sir Anna spoke, while I am not as devout as Cicero, let me tell you who is the traitor here. It is the one who rejected the old ways, the one who fought against it and defied its tenets, the one who betrayed the supposed listener whom I impersonated and ratted them to Commander Maro of the Penitus Oculatus, the one who led the agents of the Penitus Oculatus to this sanctuary. Sir Anna's words marked all the wrongdoings Astrid committed. Having her sins revealed this way, Astrid faced the judgment of the Brotherhood in front of her family members. I protected this family. I picked them up when everything was lost. I kept things running, she said. And you did well, Sir Anna replied with an assuring face. But you let your own greed take over and tarnished your sworn duty as a Dark Brotherhood assassin. To oblivion with that. Astrid shouted and tried to stand up, but she was too tired and injured. Sidis wasn't going to help us. The Night Mother wasn't going to help either. All they demanded was absolute devotion and blind trust. You signed up for this, Sir Anna said. You all did. But I didn't want to lose my life or my family. Astrid said in tears as she lowered her head. Thud. To be honest, I don't like any of this either. You chose the path of Sidhis, and now you walk it to the end. I doubt there would be a happy ending within the void, but I am sure there is no bad ending either. Sir Anna sympathized, offering some solace. Family can be what makes you strong, but it can also bring your downfall. She spoke of experience and pain. She wanted to have a family as well, but hers is something she could only make with her vampirism and power, the daughter of Cold Harbor. While her plans behind John's back were for that family to grow stronger and more powerful, she had to pass the judgment on Astrid, who was struggling for the same goal as hers. Thus, Viezra and Armjorn died to the one whom they chose to stand behind, and their sacrifice was necessary for the rise of the new listener. Serana said, "Wait," Gabriella interrupted. "Festus, is he alive?" "The wizard lives." Serana pointed to a nearby wall, and a shadow door formed that through an elderly Imperial crawled out of. "Festus!" Gabriella rushed at her friend and helped him to sit up as he seemed exhausted. From that shadow door, a small girl walked out following Festus. She was almost at the same height as Babette, but showed older features. Her hair was black, and her eyes were feline blue with her ears growing on the top of her head like a cat. "That is?" asked Nazir, the silencer of the listener, performer of the purification. Serana replied, "In other words, the one who killed Viezra and Armjorn." No one looked at Nefertiti with good intentions at this moment, seeing how small she was. Killing two of their comrades is surely something they won't easily forgive, but they had no choice but to show some hostility. In response to that, Nefertiti transformed into a wercat for the first time in a long while, and her form was nothing short of diabolical. "Thud, those legionaries you brought won't stop, Astrid," Serana said. "Only the listener can save us at this point." "Ow?" Astrid asked. "He's outside the sanctuary. All he needs is an invitation which only you can extend to him as the matron of the sanctuary. Astrid, call him." Serana said. "I don't know," Astrid said, and in a glimmer of inspiration, she realized what had to be done. She looked back towards the sealed Night Mother coffin and just knew what to do. She sat on her knees and lowered her head. She knew that to end this and prevent the Legion from destroying the sanctuary and the remaining assassins, she had to face the error of her ways. She had to contact the listener, and what better way to do so other than going directly to the Night Mother? Thud. The black door of the sanctuary wasn't going to fall, but what's at stake here was the sanctuary's integrity, as chunks of the cave system would start to collapse very soon at this rate by the look of the many cracks forming around the wall. "I am ready," Astrid said. As she said so, Nefertiti returned to her human form, placed a few candles she had around Astrid, and handed her a pair of nightshade roses. Astrid stared at Nefertiti and wondered what kind of a mighty being has become the listener of the Dark Brotherhood, who will bring it to a new dawn through the abandoned old ways. "Thud, I'm sorry for what I have caused." Astrid spoke as she rubbed her hand against her blade of woe with the petals of nightshade in hand. "Damn it, Astrid." Nazir spoke in frustration. "Girl." Festus was also sad to see Astrid reduced to that. It was then that it finally had to happen. Sweet mother, send your child upon me. For the sins of the unworthy must be baptized in blood and fear." And Astrid stabbed herself. It was then when the Night Mother's coffin opened and someone walked out. Sweet child, I hear you calling me, for the malice in your heart must be washed by void and sin." Chapter 655, O Brother. Chapter 655, O Brother. Listener, Astrid looked up at the giant man who walked out of the Night Mother's coffin with eyes filled with anger, sadness, and regret. "You know what is the best thing about atonement, Matron Astrid?" The man went down on one knee, placed his hand behind Astrid's head, and helped her lay down. "It is that as long as your heart is true, you will be freed of your sins." "Thank you," Astrid replied, feeling the piercing pain running through her stomach as she closed her tearful eyes. The man lowered his head towards Astrid, and she whispered words to his ears while barely able to keep alive with her grave burn wounds and the dagger piercing her. The man hummed to her words in a deep, strong, and hollow voice. After she rallied her request to him, the man spoke. "Rejoice, Astrid, for the name you passed upon this listener shall be delivered. Your sins are forgiven and your honor is redeemed." He held the blade of woe and took it off her stomach, causing the terrible pain to run through her body. He then aimed the blade to her heart and stabbed in a steady, fast motion. Between the listener's arms, Matron Astrid of the Dark Brotherhood's Sanctuary of Falkreath, the last standing sanctuary, has forfeited her life. Thud. Sleep, child. May the darkness of the void keep you in its cold embrace. The listener prayed. Listener, dear listener, poor Cicero is wounded. Cicero squirmed on the ground behind Serena and attracted the room's attention. Will any of you tend to the wounds of your brother? The listener called the 5 assassins standing in front of him. I shall, listener. Gabriella bowed and ran towards Cicero, forking out a small potion of her long sleeve and pouring it on Cicero's wounds. The listener stood up and carried Astrid within his arms. Listener, Nazir called, the sanctuary. Thud. With this one thud, a chunk of the wall almost collapsed over everyone's head, but out of nowhere, a fleshy substance jumped out of the listener's arm and expanded up like a pillar holding up the wall. It even started spreading all across the chamber and outside to the main hall, supporting all the cracks and collapses in the sanctuary. Gluttony had such an ability called Bloodgrove. It would actually turn into a briarheart tree and start attacking any hostile within close proximity. Looks like our legionary friends are eagerly demanding our attention. This hideout location is no longer safe. The listener said, Listener, what should we do? Babette said, I will protect you. The listener said, I will unseal the black door and we will leave. The listener handed Astrid's body to Nazir and moved towards the Night Mother's coffin. He respectfully closed the coffin, held his cloak by the shoulder, then threw it off his body to cover the entire coffin. Suddenly, the entire coffin seemed to have been swallowed somewhere and disappeared. What appeared from beneath the cloak with a man with eyes that are totally black like the void, and his bare upper half was covered in all sorts of Nordic tattoos. He was wearing a great armored belt and wide pants with vambraces around his arms and armored boots. He was akin to a dark, warmongering warrior. In his left hand, he carried the Blade of Woe, but on his right, a Blade of Light formed. The Blade of Light was akin to the most holy item in the world. It made both Babette and Serena feel uncomfortable in its presence. This was Dawnbreaker. But in the next instant, the listener's cloak that just took the Night Mother's coffin away jumped off the ground and wrapped itself around the blade, as if consuming one another. What was left was a product of utter and supreme darkness. It made not only the undead in the room, but even the living feel uncomfortable, all except Nefertiti, who was strangely drawn to it. This was Duskbringer, the corrupted form of Dawnbreaker. Lore confirmed. It was once Dawnbreaker that got corrupted by the Daedra Nocturnal. The listener was clearly not afraid of corrupting the holy item of Meridia, knowing that he will suffer no consequences, just like when he suffered on the hand of Azura, when he corrupted Azura's star. The reason for that is Greed's transformations are temporary and his stealth is perfect. All the Daedra would know is that their artifact was probably stored in a different dimension or something. Dawnbreaker, Duskbringer, Ebony Sword. Fire damage for living, shadow damage. Sun damage for undead, absorb life. Undead burst on death, corpse explosion on death. Blade of Woe, Daedric Ebony Dagger. Absorb life. Fear. Impossible to soul trap. The two weapons complemented one another greatly as weapons of mayhem and slaughter. With me, John called and walked out of the room to the main hall. Over there, he saw the bodies of both Viezra and Armjorn. Collect the bodies of your brothers, he said. The group, save for the wounded Cicero and Nazir who carried Astrid, started lifting up the 2 dead assassins and waited for John to teleport them out of here. But John didn't. He walked straight to the black door. Listener, there is no way out except through here. John said, a Brotherhood sanctuary is an isolated space. There is no way in or out unless the Night Mother allows. There is no magic that can pierce a space that is essentially a piece of the void. It seemed that the assassins never knew the true nature of a Brotherhood sanctuary, but John was very willing to show them. He confidently walked ahead and arrived at the black door. Thud! The battering ram outside the black door was furiously trying to tear down the black door. However, these doors were nigh indestructible. The sanctuary, however, was very fragile. John put the tips of his fingers against the black door and closed his eyes, waiting patiently. Half a minute passed, and he immediately performed history's most powerful one-inch punch. Thud-hud. The sound of his attack resonated with a battering ram strike coming from outside, and strange enough, the sanctuary didn't shake one bit. And it was then, what is the music of life? The familiar, ghostly voice coming from the black door sounded. Silence, my brother. You are worthy. John sneered and looked back to the shocked assassins behind him. Just a minute, and he stepped outside alone. No matter how skilled a fighter can be, no one imagined that he would face all of that on his own. But the fighter that went out returned back to the sanctuary 10 minutes later, all soaked in blood and guts. The appearance of the Madden War deity, that is this listener, made the assassins understand that they were under the protection of a great warrior, a powerhouse even. Yet despite seeing his face, the man's identity remains a mystery. Take the bodies and start moving. The listener said, take the way off the main road until you reach Lake Ilinalta. Sir Anna, you lead the way. I'll guard the rear. Understood. Sir Anna walked out first and saw the massacre John committed. Around 100 have died on his hand alone. The most notable among the group was the head of the Emperor's security in Skyrim, Commander Morrow, the man whom Astrid leaked the assassination attempt to in order to get rid of the listener. Morrow seemed to have double-crossed Astrid and laid a trap for her until he found out the location of the sanctuary and the password to it. If John didn't disturb the black door and keep it from opening, the entire Dark Brotherhood would have been annihilated. The rest of the assassins followed Serena out, and they all had to take a minute to realize the amount of damage one man can cause against 100. There were people missing parts of their bodies, people with twisted bone structures which left them in shapes only possible in one's imagination, people who were hit so badly they turned to actual mess of blood and gore, and the real lucky ones were thrown against rocks or impaled on tree branches. As soon as the assassin left, John was all alone with Nefertiti by his side. He ended channeling the chaos infection through his mystic tattoos and summoned both gluttony and greed back to him. You clean up the bodies. John ordered gluttony, then looked at greed. You've gotten more powerful, but don't act high and mighty again. Go after the assassins and help them out. Greed reformed itself into its form of greed embodiment and turned to Sleipnir, which started galloping towards the escaping assassins. Wonderful work, young listener. The spectral assassin walked out through the sanctuary door to John. Your purification was quite swift, and you killed only the unloyal. Viezra and Arnjorn wouldn't have survived without Astrid. John said, one of my people has a grudge with Viezra, so I took care of him, and Arnjorn was Astrid's husband, so he wouldn't accept losing her. As for Festus and Gabriella, I hope fate does them good. In the game, those 5 characters died during the attack at the Dark Brotherhood Falkreath Sanctuary. John saw them both as good assets, and so he decided to help them out. But if fate has other plans for them, John wasn't sure what to do anyway. He did all he could. Right now, he secured the listener's position in the Dark Brotherhood, making this the only game faction questline that he interacts with so deeply. He is a member of both the Thieves' Guild and the College of Winterhold, and an honorary member of the Companions, but he left those factions for Jelinar, Alina, and Wulfur respectfully. He wanted to leave the Dark Brotherhood for someone else, but due to the sensitive nature of the job, he needed to manipulate things on his own. In the game, a player can choose whether to join or destroy the Dark Brotherhood. John chose the 2 choices since he was the one who used Sir Anna as a proxy listener and sold information about the Brotherhood to the Penitus Oculatus and killed 3 assassins through Nefertiti. So what now? The spectral assassin asked. You have chosen to lead the Brotherhood, and the contract to kill the Emperor stands. I am planning to do it. John replied, I just want to test out that thing you told me. Oh, you really think you can do it? The spectral assassin said, You're looking down on me, Lachance. Bad move. John replied, and proceeded to the target of his latest discovery. The Black Door. Maybe the greatest secret the Dark Brotherhood ever possessed. It doesn't take an architectural genius to realize that every Dark Brotherhood sanctuary was built in a location that makes it impossible to construct anything if not with the interference of a great force. A lazy writer would pin it on Sid's, but John has asked the spectral assassin, Lucien Lachance, a question, and the answer he received intrigued him fully. That's why John stood in front of that black door. What is the music of life? The black door asked its usual question now that John's seal on it was lifted. Silence. O brother, for we are worthy of peace and quiet. John answered. The answer was different, and the black door had neither opened for him nor shut him out. Ask again. John said. What is life's greatest illusion? The black door asked. Innocence, O brother, for we are worthy of self-entitlement to righteousness. John answered. Ask again. What is the color of night? The door asked. Sanguine, O brother, for we are worthy of the beauty hailed from mother kine and father shore. John answered. Ask again. What is the flavor of fear? The door asked. Sublime, O brother, for we are worthy of death, and through its fear do we glorify the moment we elevate and see the tower. John answered. Ask again. What is the gift of death? The door asked. Solace, O brother, for we are worthy of life, but only those who are awake in the dream know that we have been here once before. John answered. At the fifth question, John didn't ask for more questions. The black door was fully active, and its energy was stronger than ever. Looking into it, John saw the void, and the void saw John. They were not strangers to each other, since John has walked it once as the advocate of Sid is. It was now John's turn to ask questions. What is life of music? John asked, twisting the original question. Change, my brother. The black door answered. We are unworthy. Change whirls life, and we muse in agony. What is the fear of flavor? John asked, twisting the original question. Stasis, my brother. The black door answered. We are unworthy. Change came when we were all tasteless. What is the night of color? John asked, twisting the original question. Chaos, my brother. The black door answered. We are unworthy. Chaos ends all as night ends all days. What is the death of gifts? John asked, twisting the original question. Order, my brother. The black door answered. We are unworthy. Chaos is where all gifts stem, and order is their end. John nodded, satisfied with the four answers, before asking the fifth question. And what is the name of your dread father? John asked. Sid is my brother. The black door answered. We are unworthy. Sid still travels in a phosphorescent mirror of the sky, drowned, and smiling intermittent hopes enough to answer all the things not yet queried. You lie. John tilted his head with a threatening look on his face. Say his true name. Sith is it, my brother? The black door answered. We are the unworthy. Yes. John nodded. Sigh this it. But you're still wrong, for you misheard his true name statement. I'll tell you his first secret syllable. It is that of is, and your misfollowed father's true name becomes is this it. John stated and shouted. Face terror of your folly. We are unworthy. To John's anger, the black door cried. John spread his hands for black door, and cracks started to form around its stone door frame. The cracks spread, and the black door fell from its hinges on John's hands. Behind the fallen black door, the entrance of the sanctuary was not there, as if it didn't exist in the first place, for it was simply a rock wall. This meant that whatever sanctuary the Brotherhood used, the black door is not simply its door, but rather it is the sanctuary itself. John carried the door with a satisfied face. Only he can argue a door to submission. And now, what do you call me? John asked. The black door went quiet for a while, as if it was deep in thoughts. The black door then answered, Mother. The spectral assassin fell in a mad laughter as John's lips formed into blowing out the letter F with extreme vigor. Chapter 656, A New Sanctuary. Chapter 656, A New Sanctuary. And so the Dark Brotherhood survived with more members than it was supposed to have. In the game, the worst-case scenario would only be Nazir and Babette surviving the massacre, with Cicero being the third survivor in a best-case scenario. Yet not only was it Babette, Nazir, and Cicero, but there were Festus Crex and Gabriella, as well as Serana. John even took the Black Door from Falkreath and stored it away before joining the rest of the members at the borders of Whitron and Falkreath. There, they dug a grave for both Astrid and Armjorn and laid their bodies with Nirn. As for Viezra, John looked for Nazir and instructed him. Take him to the Sleeping Tree Giants camp. There, you will find a unique tree known as the Sleeping Tree. It is a premature hiss tree that somehow grew around there. It would be best to lay his body there. Once you're done, come to the Nightgate village on the road where Winterhold, Eastmarch, and the Pale meet. Yes, listener. Nazir obeyed John and took a horse carrying Viezra on its back. As for the rest, John teleported them to the Nightgate village and found a location not too far from Wayward Pass that leads to Sarthel. There, he found a fitting place and took out the Black Door before installing it in a location hidden from view. It didn't need much for the Black Door to install itself and fix a door frame around its location. How marvelous, listener! Festus Crex applauded John. I have never known such a thing would ever be possible. It is my first time seeing that as well. Babette followed up, installing a Black Door. Realistically, it wasn't possible, but John discovered that each Dark Brotherhood sanctuary is a pocket dimension that was imported from the Void of Sidhis. The Void contains many realities, many possibilities, many forms of the future. It also contains fragments and clones of things that exist. During his adventure to Hammerfell, John visited a place known as the Abyss, which is a series of looping and repeating realities woven together by the Void. There, one can walk in a Nordic crypt, for example, before finding himself in a dwarven ruin, a goblin cave, a Daedra den, or an undead tomb in the next turn. As for the Black Doors and the sanctuaries, they would function the same. My own theory. Each sanctuary comes from the Void by linking a Black Door to a suitable door frame. Most of the Black Doors were already placed in places that are impossible to construct anything behind. For example, the Falkreath Sanctuary was built under a road with an interior that seemed very large on the inside compared to the space on the outside. Another example is the Sanctuary of Dawnstar, which is basically a building that was carved inside a mountain. This doesn't mean that a sanctuary is completely isolated behind a Black Door. There were recorded cases of breaking into a Dark Brotherhood sanctuary without going through a Black Door. Such cases were like the case of the troll in Dawnstar Sanctuary and accessing the sanctuary through a well, as it was in Cheydinhole. All in all, a Black Door imports a space from the Void behind itself and integrates it into reality in order to create a hideout for the assassins of the Brotherhood. That's why a Black Door was technically impenetrable without a password, since you would be banging and ramming against a piece of stone leaning on a mountain. But the Black Door can receive damage, and the inside space may collapse from that as well. The thing that gave off the most obvious clue was the existence of a water current that formed a small waterfall inside the sanctuary of Falkreath, while in fact there was no active waterway around that area. But now it was time to witness what this newly established sanctuary will offer. John approached the Black Door and touched it. The eyes glowed with red aura and spoke. What is life's greatest sin? The Black Door asked. For such a question to pop up. A question about sins for the man who holds his sins in his hands. John smiled, and his smile kept growing wider. Audacity, my brother. John replied. Welcome home. The Black Door replied and became unlocked. John pushed it slowly and noticed a stairway leading down and a well-built brick corridor. Let's go, John said. As he walked in and the remaining assassins followed, they all arrived at a hall with many pillars and a basin that had a fountain. The whole thing was built with mountain stone and resembles the old Falkreath Sanctuary in terms of layout. It seemed that the Black Door had a layout that was somewhat constant, but the theme would change depending on the location it is planted in. Right now, It has taken a style somewhat similar to that of Windhelm and Winterhold. All right, I'll give you a day to prepare and get this place running. John said, Cicero, I'll leave some funds in your hands, so go and make this place feel like home. Oh, listener, you're giving Cicero money? The jester snatched the purse that John passed him. Oomph, it's only for food and furniture. If I find out that you wasted my money, you will suffer the 1,000 claws of annihilation. John said, and Nefertiti extended her claws in front of Cicero. Of course, Cicero waved his hands. I was just thinking of buying something nice for our dear mother. Get on with it. John said, when Nazir gets back, he will handle the money and I will share the upcoming plan with you all. Rest for now. And like that, John established the new Dark Brotherhood sanctuary outside the Nightgate village, just outside his doorstep in Winterhold. With that, he could start focusing on the plan to go on with the Emperor's assassination plan. By the next day, all the assassins were gathered in the sanctuary, and they grouped around John, who sat at a large chair in front of a stone table. As it is the first time you work for me, I would love to clarify a few things. John said, I don't care what you do, so long you don't break the 5 tenets. This was the first introduction John gave for the assassins. Cicero, Nazir, Babette, Festus, and Gabriella. They never worked with him before, so they had to understand him through this brief conversation. The 5 tenets were simple, just as follows. Tenet I, never dishonor the Night Mother. To do so is to invoke the wrath of Siddhis. Tenet 2, never betray the Dark Brotherhood or its secrets. To do so is to invoke the wrath of Siddhis. Tenet 3, never disobey or refuse to carry out an order from a Dark Brotherhood superior. To do so is to invoke the wrath of Siddhis. Tenet 4, never steal the possessions of a Dark Brother or Dark Sister. To do so is to invoke the wrath of Siddhis. Tenet V, never kill a Dark Brother or Dark Sister. To do so is to invoke the wrath of Siddhis. All in all, it was all about honoring the Night Mother, keeping the Brotherhood's secrets, obeying superiors, not robbing or not killing other assassins. Thinking of Astrid and her reasons to abolish those 5 vital rules, the assassins present understood that they surely waned and became unworthy. John then continued the introduction. My identity will be kept from all of you because I want to keep it that way. He said, my speaker is and always has been Serana, a member of the Black Hand. So far, Serana will be the speaker, Cicero will be the keeper, and I am the listener. The rest of you shall do the administrative affairs. Nazir the Red Guard. John then called. Yes, listener. Nazir replied. You will be in charge of finance. I want you to keep bringing outside hits and contracts outside the normal Black Sacrament jobs. Also, you need to make sure that you don't pick high-profile targets and run the names with me once every month. John said, Yes, sir. Babette the Vampire. John called. Yes, she replied. I have heard you have a talent for working with unusual creatures. Spiders, trolls, and such. John said, You will find an abundance of those things in the nearby caves. I want you to go and make some friends with the locals in this neighborhood. Yes, listener. Festus the Mage and Gabriella the Alchemist. John called. Yes. Yes, listener. The 2 replied. You 2 are obviously my seniors, and out of respect, I won't give you more than what you usually did in the past, but I will call upon your expertise from time to time. Thank you greatly, listener. Gabriella nodded. Yes, thank you, my listener. At my age, it is hard to be overworked this way. Festus said and glanced over to Babette. Hey, Babette slammed her hand on the table. You want to laze around, don't you? She then turned to John. Listener, he is just lazy. I am his senior, and he just wants to lay down and watch me work. Haha, listen to this little girl. Festus chuckled while looking down on Babette. You 2, Nazir called in a stern time. Show some respect. The listener is not finished yet. They all immediately noticed the look on John's face, which was void of tolerance towards their actions. If he wants to, they would face some consequences they are not prepared for. Currently, John was using the chaos infection to mask his identity by looking like a man with full black eyes and mystical black tattoos. His appearance was nightmare-inducing even for those old assassins. After all, they're under new management. Cicero, you will keep the sanctuary in top condition, John said, continuing distributing the jobs. Oh, thank you. Thank you greatly, listener. Cicero, your loyal follower, will make sure not a speck of dust lingers in the sanctuary. Cicero replied with overexcitement. As for you, Serena, you and I will head out to finish this emperor contract together. Chapter 656-2. Chapter 656-2. Titus Mede II, current emperor of the Third Empire, vanquisher of the Almorai Dominion, hero of the Culling, savior of Cyrodiil, and the man who fooled the world. The man has indeed ended the war and saved humanity from the tyranny of the High Elves. Still, he knows that he didn't participate in the final battle of the Red Ring and wasn't the one who stopped the elves at the tower during the culling. It was a friend he had never seen since then, a forgotten hero, Glymet. But what weighed the old emperor more was the fact that another friend of his can't still forgive him for the things that happened. Back in the day, if he stopped the dissolving of the blades and saved John Rad's family when they needed, things would have turned different between him and John Rad Firemane, former head of the Emperor's security. Moreover, he lost more than he gained as an emperor. A threatened land, a fractured front, Hammerfell's independence, Skyrim split, and Talos worship outlawed. In his heart, the Great War was a defeat no matter how much the imperial historians try to sugarcoat it. Titus Mede II was crowned emperor in the year 168 of the Fourth Era, inheriting a weakened empire from his predecessor, consisting of Hammerfell, High Rock, Skyrim, and Cyrodiil, of which only the latter three remained peaceful and prosperous, as Hammerfell was in civil war. The imperial military was also greatly weakened from many wars that the empire had been involved in, and what remained of the legion forces was scattered across the provinces. With the Great War and its dreadful days, the emperor no longer wanted wars and hoped to see peace and prosperity. He sacrificed a lot and achieved too little. If not what divided the man was nothing but greed, then the imperial coffers would have built cities of gold and silver for its people. But what set men apart was more than just greed, fear, or hate. It is love. For a nation, love is the engine of success on which the entire history is based. If this love is directed at ill-intended endeavors such as money, lust, and pleasures, the people will surely be spoiled and diverted from progress. If a nation gets too strong and when its wealth overflows, it will crumble from the inside slowly until it falls with not a shred of grace. What falls apart first is honor and dignity. Those who are vermin to society will act like worms to spread their infestation and use their dark endeavors to soon inflict it upon the new generation. Once the deviation starts, the vermin start to present their poison to society as new ideals, liberties, and trends. Those with weakness in their hearts, which are many in times of welfare, shall follow their lusts and desires, thoughtless and unconscious. Little by little, the face of society would start to change, and the vermin would spread their dirty stains to all branches of society. By then, the game of wording would have been lost under the fake symbols and the wordy sentences. Like venom, the effects start to show beginning with fever. Those who resist the vermin will face scorn and hate. Society will crumble because the vermin struck its heart. Families crumble apart. Women disobey men. Children taken from their parents, raised by wolves in the dens of cruelty to be the freaks of the new generation. And not a word is said since all has already been lost to the vermin. Once the family unit is down in society, things escalate at a fast pace. With no faith, no bonds, no actual love in all these dark corners, the fake love turns out to be woven by the laughs of the vermin who brought down another society and spread their poison in the heart of a nation. All that is left will be a dying emperor on a crumbling throne watching in his last days what fate awaits his land. But in a world of divines and Deidre, wouldn't this give him a chance? Wouldn't a miracle be nothing too impossible? After all, he had a meeting today, and he would hate it if he was not prepared. He looked up, and despite his prior knowledge of a man coming to end it all, he still couldn't help but be surprised. Fate was cruel indeed for him to die to his good friend's look-alike. John and Serana headed out of the sanctuary, and John sent Serana to pick up the new location of the Emperor from the employer of the Dark Brotherhood, Amon Modier. John already knew, but the Night Mother informed him to meet with Amon Modier, and so he did through Serana. Once it was over, John and Serana headed toward Solitude. The Emperor wasn't on the mainland of Solitude, but preferred to remain in his ship at the mouth of the river. It was just too easy to walk in and avoid all security to reach the Emperor. He was there in a room deep at the back of the ship, just sitting behind his desk and writing. He raised his eyes, glanced over John with an eye of shock and sadness before finishing what he was writing and resting back. The Emperor spoke. And once more, I proved Commander Morrow the fool. I told him you can't stop the Dark Brotherhood. Never could. Come now, don't be shy. You haven't come this far just to stand there gawking. Your Highness, John spoke. Serana walked past John and looked at Titus Mead. You were expecting us? But of course, you and I have a date with destiny. But so it is with assassins and emperors. Yes, I must die, and you must deliver the blow. It is simply the way it is. But I wonder, would you suffer an old man a few more words before the deed is done? John walked ahead and sat at the chair right in front of the Emperor. Serana copied John and walked to the other chair. From John's ring, a skull flew up and turned into a humanoid. Kill the fake Emperor, Dragonborn. It is you who is rightful. Envy broke free and pleaded with John, but as John waved his hand, Envy was captured and returned to the ring. Sorry about that. Dragonborn. The Emperor narrowed his eyes before breaking into a smile. So you had the world fooled, son of Johnrad. John smirked, but his eyes displayed no cockiness like usual. What? John asked. The Emperor tilted his head slightly with a distant smile. I'm afraid your question is vague. The Emperor remarked. You hired us through a proxy to kill you, John said, causing the look in Serana's eyes to widen and turn around for traps. I see. The Emperor nodded. Was it this obvious? No. John shook his head, but he then took an amulet out of his pocket and displayed it to the Emperor. An Elder Council member wouldn't give that up unless he was promised something greater, and only you could do so. True, the Emperor nodded, but you, children of the Dread Father, have already accepted the contract. A sacrament was made. I can get rid of the Dark Brotherhood like turning my hand. John said, you went through the pain of coming from Cyrodiil all the way here. You let your cousin be projected to danger. You brought along a body double and... Ha ha ha. The Emperor laughed slowly, interrupting John. He then looked at the paper in front of his desk, picked up a quill, and wrote 2 words. What makes you laugh? John asked. It is just... I feel like a fool now. Titus Mead replied, a fool with a plan. And your death will set things in motion? John asked. Fate sets things in motion, John dare. The Emperor replied in an educating manner. My fate is to die. So I was right. John said, you are damning your soul to sit his just to cause change. It seems you figured things out, and no need for us to go in circles. The Emperor said and became serious. Wait. At that point, Serana spoke. I don't understand a thing. John didn't turn to her, but he replied. Tell me, Serana, what is fate? John asked. Possibilities of the future. She replied. Do you believe that these possibilities are infinite? John asked. Not in the short run, no. Serana said. The future and its impacts echo to a certain distance of possibilities that expand upon each other to branch out into an infinite series of more possibilities. Looks like your friend is not that knowledgeable. The Emperor spoke to John. Excuse her, she's just a 1,000 years old vampire. John replied. Oh. The Emperor nodded in understanding. What did I get wrong? Serana asked. Using the word infinite to define something finite is a mistake people tend to make. The future is always limited. John said, time is running out, and as everything has a beginning, it has an ending, meaning that nothing is infinite. John said, outside the realm of our understanding, I mean. It is an extremely frustrating notion, since no matter what we mortals try to accomplish, we always know that there is a limit to how much we can reach. The word innumerable possibilities is a good alternative when dealing with possible predictions you are too lazy to count. I understand the philosophy, but what does this have to do with our job here? Sarana asked. As you can see, our client here has run out of future possibilities, John said, pointing at the Emperor. He tried all the innumerable possibilities and scenarios, but it seemed that they have all turned out not what he wished for. Like, he wants something from us that he can't achieve on his own. Sarana asked. Close. He just wants to involve Siddhis, John said. As the soul of change, Siddhis is a force that alters whatever it touches. The Emperor knew that the fate of his empire is bleak, thus he chose to pass as a hero who died to the blade of an assassin. Think about it. With every involvement of the Dark Brotherhood, change is brought upon the world. And so a dying empire may find a chance. Sarana nodded. Quite drastic and too wishful, if I may say so myself. A dying empire. John sighed. It is already dead, the Emperor said. What? Sarana frowned. 200 years ago, with the disappearance of the last Septim Emperor and the end of the Dragonborn Emperor's line, there was no need for an empire anymore. John then asked, Isn't that what you wish for? Who knows? The Emperor shook his shoulders. The first empire was made by forging a pact with Akatosh. Now that pact is broken. John pieced it together, so there is no need for an empire. John stared blankly, and his eyes landed on the Emperor's seal. It looked exactly like the Elder Scrolls logo on the game's menu. A cracked and old symbol of the dragon. One last hit, and it is no longer useful. One stab to the Emperor's chest, and the Empire is no more. Why? Because there is no need for it to exist anymore. Something new should rise. John looked at the Elder Council amulet in his hand and rubbed it with his fingers. So the future, John muttered. It is in your hands, young people. The Emperor said, though, I can use a favor. I am listening. John said, while there are many who would see me dead, there is one who set the machine in motion. This person, whomever he or she may be, must be punished for their treachery. Once you have been rewarded for my assassination, I want you to kill the very person who ordered it. Would you do me this kindness? The Emperor said his final will, hoping for the death of his proxy. I will think about it. John showed acceptance. Thank you. Now, on to the business at hand, I suppose, the Emperor said and held the arms of his seat. Even though he literally courted death, it is not a welcoming moment. Sarana, asterisk swoosh, star, right to the Emperor's heart. And the Emperor's hands slowly let go of the chair as his head dangled lifelessly. He was no longer the warring brute from a few days ago. He was a sad man dying alone to the cold blade of an assassin. And to an empire reborn into something else, something new. Chapter 657. Chapter 657. Titus Mede II, current Emperor of the Third Empire, vanquisher of the Almarai Dominion, hero of the Culling, savior of Cyrodiil, and a man who fooled the world. The man has indeed ended the war and saved humanity from the tyranny of the High Elves. Still, he knows that he didn't participate in the final battle of the Red Ring and wasn't the one who stopped the elves at the tower during the culling. It was a friend he had never seen since then, a forgotten hero, Glymet. But what weighed the old emperor more was the fact that another friend of his can't still forgive him for the things that happened. Back in the day, if he stopped the dissolving of the blades and saved John Rad's family when they needed, things would have turned different between him and John Rad Firemane, former head of the Emperor's security. Moreover, he lost more than he gained as an emperor. A threatened land, a fractured front, Hammerfell's independence, Skyrim split, and Talos worship outlawed. In his heart, the Great War was a defeat no matter how much the imperial historians try to sugarcoat it. Titus Mede too was crowned emperor in the year 168 of the Fourth Era, inheriting a weakened empire from his predecessor, consisting of Hammerfell, High Rock, Skyrim, and Cyrodiil, of which only the latter three remained peaceful and prosperous, as Hammerfell was in civil war. The imperial military was also greatly weakened from many wars that the empire had been involved in, and what remained of the legion forces was scattered across the provinces. With the Great War and its dreadful days, the emperor no longer wanted wars and hoped to see peace and prosperity. He sacrificed a lot and achieved too little. If not what divided the men was nothing but greed, then the imperial coffers would have built cities of gold and silver for its people. But what set men apart was more than just greed, fear, or hate. It is love. For a nation, love is the engine of success on which the entire history is based. If this love is directed at ill-intended endeavors such as money, lust, and pleasures, the people will surely be spoiled and diverted from progress. If a nation gets too strong and when its wealth overflows, it will crumble from the inside slowly until it falls with not a shred of grace. What falls apart first is honor and dignity. Those who are vermin to society will act like worms to spread their infestation and use their dark endeavors to soon inflict it upon the new generation. Once the deviation starts, the vermin start to present their poison to society as new ideals, liberties, and trends. Those with weakness in their hearts, which are many in times of welfare, shall follow their lusts and desires, thoughtless and unconscious. Little by little, the face of society would start to change, and the vermin would spread their dirty stains to all branches of society. By then, the game of wording would have been lost under the fake symbols and the wordy sentences. Like venom, the effects start to show beginning with fever. Those who resist the vermin will face scorn and hate. Society will crumble because the vermin struck its heart. Families crumble apart. Women disobey men. Children taken from their parents, raised by wolves in the dens of cruelty to be the freaks of the new generation. And not a word is said since all has already been lost to the vermin. Once the family unit is down in society, things escalate at a fast pace. With no faith, no bonds, no actual love in all these dark corners, the fake love turns out to be woven by the laughs of the vermin who brought down another society and spread their poison in the heart of a nation. All that is left will be a dying emperor on a crumbling throne watching in his last days what fate awaits his land. But in a world of divines and Daedra, wouldn't this give him a chance? Wouldn't a miracle be nothing too impossible? After all, he had a meeting today, and he would hate it if he was not prepared. He looked up, and despite his prior knowledge of a man coming to end it all, he still couldn't help but be surprised. Fate was cruel indeed for him to die to his good friend's look-alike. John and Serana headed out of the sanctuary, and John sent Serana to pick up the new location of the Emperor from the employer of the Dark Brotherhood, Amon Modier. John already knew, but the Night Mother informed him to meet with Amon Modier, and so he did through Serana. Once it was over, John and Serana headed toward Solitude. The Emperor wasn't on the mainland of Solitude, but preferred to remain in his ship at the mouth of the river. It was just too easy to walk in and avoid all security to reach the Emperor. He was there in a room deep at the back of the ship, just sitting behind his desk and writing. He raised his eyes, glanced over John with an eye of shock and sadness before finishing what he was writing and resting back. The Emperor spoke. And once more, I proved Commander Morrow the Fool. I told him you can't stop the Dark Brotherhood. Never could. Come now, don't be shy. You haven't come this far just to stand there gawking. Your Highness, John spoke. Serana walked past John and looked at Titus Mede. You were expecting us? But of course, you and I have a date with destiny. But so it is with assassins and emperors. Yes, I must die, and you must deliver the blow. It is simply the way it is. But I wonder, would you suffer an old man a few more words before the deed is done? John walked ahead and sat the chair right in front of the Emperor. Serana copied John and walked to the other chair. From John's ring, a skull flew up and turned into a humanoid. Kill the fake Emperor, Dragonborn. It is you who is rightful. Envy broke free and pleaded with John, but as John waved his hand, Envy was captured and returned to the ring. Sorry about that, Dragonborn. The Emperor narrowed his eyes before breaking into a smile. So you had the world fooled, son of Johnrad. John smirked, but his eyes displayed no cockiness like usual. What? John asked. The Emperor tilted his head slightly with a distant smile. I'm afraid your question is vague. The Emperor remarked. You hired us through a proxy to kill you, John said, causing the look in Serana's eyes to widen and turn around for traps. I see. The Emperor nodded. Was it this obvious? No. John shook his head, but he then took an amulet out of his pocket and displayed it to the Emperor. An elder council member wouldn't give that up unless he was promised something greater, and only you could do so. True. The Emperor nodded. But you, children of the Dread Father, have already accepted the contract. A sacrament was made. I can get rid of the Dark Brotherhood like turning my hand. John said, you went through the pain of coming from Cyrodiil all the way here. You let your cousin be projected to danger. You brought along a body double, and... Ha ha ha. The Emperor laughed slowly, interrupting John. He then looked at the paper in front of his desk, picked up a quill, and wrote 2 words. What makes you laugh? John asked. It is just... I feel like a fool now. Titus Mead replied, a fool with a plan, and your death will set things in motion. John asked. Fate sets things in motion, John Dare. The Emperor replied in an educating manner. My fate is to die. So I was right. John said, you are damning your soul to sit his just to cause change. It seems you have figured things out, and no need for us to go in circles. The Emperor said and became serious. Wait. At that point, Serana spoke. I don't understand a thing. John didn't turn to her, but he replied. Tell me, Serana, what is fate? John asked. Possibilities of the future. She replied. Do you believe that these possibilities are infinite? John asked. Not in the short run, no. Serana said. The future and its impacts echo to a certain distance of possibilities that expand upon each other to branch out into an infinite series of more possibilities. Looks like your friend is not that knowledgeable. The Emperor spoke to John. Excuse her, she's just a 1,000 years old vampire. John replied. Oh, the Emperor nodded in understanding. What'd I get wrong? Serana asked. Using the word infinite to define something finite is a mistake people tend to make. The future is always limited. John said, time is running out, and as everything has a beginning, it has an ending, meaning that nothing is infinite. John said, outside the realm of our understanding, It is an extremely frustrating notion, since no matter what we mortals try to accomplish, we always know that there is a limit to how much we can reach. The word innumerable possibilities is a good alternative when dealing with possible predictions you are too lazy to count. I understand the philosophy, but what does this have to do with our job here? Serana asked. As you can see, our client here has run out of future possibilities. John said, pointing at the Emperor. He tried all the innumerable possibilities and scenarios, but it seemed that they have all turned out not what he wished for. Like, he wants something from us that he can't achieve on his own? Serana asked. Close. He just wants to involve Sidhis. John said. As the soul of change, Sidhis is a force that alters whatever it touches. The Emperor knew that the fate of his empire is bleak, thus he chose to pass as a hero who died to the blade of an assassin. Think about it. With every involvement of the Dark Brotherhood, change is brought upon the world. And so a dying empire may find a chance. Serana nodded. Quite drastic and too wishful, if I may say so myself. A dying empire. John sighed. It is already dead, the Emperor said. What? Serana frowned. 200 years ago, with the disappearance of the last Septim Emperor and the end of the Dragonborn Emperor's line, there was no need for an empire anymore. John then asked, Isn't that what you wish for? Who knows? The emperor shook his shoulders. The first empire was made by forging a pact with Akatosh. Now that pact is broken. John pieced it together, so there is no need for an empire. John stared blankly, and his eyes landed on the emperor's seal. It looked exactly like the Elder Scrolls logo on the game's menu. A cracked and old symbol of the dragon. One last hit, and it is no longer useful. One stab to the emperor's chest, and the empire is no more. Why? Because there is no need for it to exist anymore. Something new should rise. John looked at the Elder Council amulet in his hand and rubbed it with his fingers. So the future. John muttered. It is in your hands, young people. The emperor said, though, I can use a favor. I'm listening. John said, while there are many who would see me dead, there is one who set the machine in motion. This person, whomever he or she may be, must be punished for their treachery. Once you have been rewarded for my assassination, I want you to kill the very person who ordered it. Would you do me this kindness? The emperor said his final will, hoping for the death of his proxy. I will think about it. John showed acceptance. Thank you. Now, on to the business at hand, I suppose, the emperor said and held the arms of his seat. Even though he literally courted death, it is not a welcoming moment. Sarana, asterisk swoosh, star, right to the emperor's heart. And the emperor's hands slowly let go of the chair as his head dangled lifelessly. He was no longer the warring brute from a few days ago. He was a sad man dying alone to the cold blade of an assassin. Into an empire reborn into something else, something new. Chapter 658, An Empire Free. Chapter 658, An Empire Free. John sat at a high peak early in the morning, thinking and meditating for a clear mind. He could see the entire world beneath where he sat, and it brought him peace. A broken world. Will you shut up, Shadow? John replied as his thoughts were interrupted by the leech at the back of his mind. Too broken for my taste. Shadow said, you could have just become the emperor, but you're still going on with that old broken man's ideas. John exhaled heavily and closed his eyes. Over his head, the demon-like shadow was looming over his head in a mass of animated darkness. Don't listen to him. Another voice interrupted the demon-like shadow. As it animated itself in another mass or darkness, it turned to a human-like shadow. All you need is to do what you want, but be swift with it. Two shadows, a demon and a human. You two are annoying to no end. John said, it was a mistake allowing you to meet Shiagarath. Now I have to deal with the two of you at the same time. He's so disheartening. Hey, you're so disheartening. The demon shadow started to mock John with his bullying manner of speaking. You're just staring at nothing while doing nothing useful. At least with your company, you were invading the world by buying it. Is there a way to turn him off? John asked. Beats me, the human shadow replied. At that moment, footsteps were heard coming towards John. The two shadows finally disappeared, and John focused on the elder coming towards him. Dovakian, the elder graybeard, spoke. Master Arngir. John walked off the edge of the mountain and stood up in respect for the old man who came. I see you have perfected listening to the voice of the sky. Kind encases you with her blessing. Arngir said, but he then spotted John's shadow beneath his feet and noticed it being heavier and darker than most. Sky above, voice within. John said, these words I learned here were greater than any word of power I learned. A lot is in your mind, Dragonborn. Arngir remarked. The Emperor is dead. John remarked the first thing that came to his mind. I see. Arngir said, you wish to become one. Not really. John shook his shoulders. Young Tiber Septim was eager to lead and conquer. Arngir said, hinting out that as part of his nature as dragon blood. Young John Dare would rather by the ruby throne rather than go killing left and right. John replied, it is empty, you know. How so? Arngir asked. The empire died 200 years ago. It stood 200 years till now, and it feels like we're watching someone animating the dead. Eventually, it crumbles, but it is saddening. John said, No amulet of kings, no divine covenant with Akatosh, no sacred bloodline of dragon emperors, no dragon's fire at the temple of the One. It is just the age of men, John said. No longer will the divines rule beside men. Men will rule themselves by themselves, and they will become free. Same as creation intended them to be. Arngeir said. Yes. John nodded and turned to watch the clouds with Arngeir before asking a strange out-of-place question. Do you know the story of Adam and Eve? Adam and Eve? Arngeir frowned. A man and a woman created as the first humans. John said their creator put them in a garden and told them to live in utter luxury as in heaven, for it was actually heaven. However, they were told not to go near a certain tree. In some versions of the story, there was a guardian on the tree with a sword of fire. In others, there was none so much, so the tree itself was just an ordinary tree in the garden, barely noticeable. The couple later disobeyed their creator and ate from the tree by the trickery of a snake. The snake promised them what mortals always seek so dearly, and they blindly believed him. After they ate, they were projected nude to each other and were released on the mortal world, which in contrast to heaven, a thorny place with dangers and death. John finished his story and looked to Arngeir. What do you think? He asked. Arngeir looked at the sky, and for the first time, the man was puzzled. Though they sinned, they were meant to sin. Their creator wanted them to sin. Arngeir, well, it can hardly be a sin then. Humans are repulsive. Indeed. John nodded. To me, the old man found it hard to say. It was clearly a test. If they were truly the first man and woman, they needed to be taught something important before they were sent to the mortal world and part ways from the safety of the heavens. And that is? John asked as he noticed that Arngeir had caught up. Free will, Arngeir said. The two smiled and looked at the sky deeply. There is no need for me to be emperor when I am Dragonborn. Humans can rule themselves with their own free will. John said. Thank you for the insight, Dragonborn. Arngeir said, in a word of warning. John turned to Arngeir, waiting for his warning. The gray wind is what inspired the dragons to feed their hunger. He came to them from where they least expected and defeated their wills. Master Arngeir said. John looked at his own shadow and smirked. I keep the fucker in check. John's reply was disrespectful, but judging by what he was talking about, Master Arngeir couldn't be offended by John's language at all. So, why did you come for us, Dragonborn? Arngeir said, You stated that you need assistance. John nodded. I have sent a declaration of war. John said. The words were strange and too sudden for Arngeir, who is a graybeard and uninvolved in anything politics-related. All right, to whom? Arngeir didn't feel curious, but wanted John to stretch his statement a bit. All the 9 Jarls of the 9 holds of Skyrim. John said a sentence that even Arngeir couldn't ignore one bit. Everyone knew John was light in the head at times, but that was a brand new form of utter madness. Now, why would you do that? Arngeir said with a frown. You don't want the Empire, so you will settle for Skyrim. Well, I sent the declaration of war, but I am not planning to rule anything. John said, I just wrote the name of the sender as the dragon cult. Arngeir heard John and couldn't decide how to react. John Dare just woke up one day, pulled out 9 pieces of parchment from his desk, wrote a declaration of war on behalf of the dragon cult, and sent it to all the major holds. So, Arngeir asked, with what happened to Solitude, everyone will start running around like headless chickens. John said, at this time, one man will invite them all to fight the dragon cult. You? Arngeir asked. The Dragonborn? Technically me, yeah. John gave thumbs up. And why are you informing the Greybeards of this? Arngeir asked. Because, Master Arngeir, I think we should invite the 9 Jarls up here high Hrothgar. John said, let's hold a big peace meeting in the name of the Dragonborn. The request shocked Master Arngeir the Greybeards, and he seemed quite disturbed, but John stated a few reasons for his request. First, he wanted a mutual ground for the warring Nords to come around for a meeting with their weapons at the door. It has to fulfill both the condition of being neutral, respectful, and agreeable by all Jarls. Second, Ulfric Stormcloak is known to be rash, and after the dragon cult's attack on Solitude, he was already amassing his army to attack Whiterun. If the Greybeards, who were his former masters, interfered in this situation, his reasoning will be affected and he will stand down. Third, the dragon cult fears High Hrothgar as it seemed from their movements. The Snowthroat Mountain was once the seat of the highest power during the dragon cult days, where Alduin himself resided. While it is now inhabited by Parthurnax and the Greybeards, who are all immensely powerful, the dragon cult won't dare to take the chance and attack the whole lot of leaders like when they try to do with the Blue Palace. Jon didn't want to give anyone a chance, especially after the Emperor's death. This would feel like another blow to the Imperial side and a sudden boost to the Stormcloaks, but if they were to keep warring each other, all would finally serve the dragons and Alduin. Now if the dragon cult was to officially declare war, especially after the number of forces they revealed at Solitude, it would give the illusion that the dragon cult has more forces on standby and ready to jump on the next city. More to that, the Jarls will start sending out more men to look for the dragon cult hideouts in their lands, which will prove useful for Jon anyway. Once they are found, they will be attacked and rooted. That put Jon in a very good mood now that he headed back to Winterhold and decided to rest for the day in his wife's embrace. Tomorrow, he will head out to Rift Inn and exact punishment on Maven and her arch-wizard. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.